What's up, everybody, and welcome to the Golf 360 podcast. I'm the host, Pete Popovich. So you may be asking yourself, what is Golf 360? And Golf 360 is a show that was designed to introduce you to people associated with the game of golf to help you improve not only at your game, but also your life. Almost all of our guests are from within the industry in some way, shape, or form, but some of the guests we have are from outside the industry, and it mainly revolves around the business world with a few others scattered in here and there. Now, all of the guests that we have a few things in common. One, they all were highly successful and accomplished in their field. Two, each has something to pass along that will help you in your game and your life. And three, they were all more than willing to give back by passing along the things that they use to help them in their career, and even some of the mistakes that they made so that others don't make them in their journey. So I hope you find listening to them as enjoyable as I did interviewing them, and that each and every one of you benefits from the information that they so willingly and graciously pass along. This podcast is brought to you in part by Just Thrive Probiotic. You may be surprised to learn that your digestive system is the key to creating and maintaining the quality of your physical, mental, and emotional health, and it's one of the body's most essential systems. That's why the majority of nutritionists today highly recommend probiotics as an indispensable nutritional supplement. As a discriminating consumer, you've probably been searching for a probiotic that is proven, potent, and effective, and you found it. Just Thrive is your best choice for maintaining a healthy lifestyle. Just Thrive Probiotic captures the power of hundreds of thousands of years of nature's design with a specialized bacillus strain formulation that guarantees survivability through the stomach and upper digestive system. Supports optimum gut health, digestive health, immune health, and delivers antioxidants. Great for adults, kids, and the whole family. Use promo code GOLF360 at www.thriveprobiotic.com for 10% off your order. This podcast is brought to you in part by Old South Golf Links. A short ride across a bridge from Hilton Head Island is one of the area's finest golf courses and a hidden treasure. Set up on towering pines and ancient oaks with sweeping marsh vistas, truly makes Old South Golf Links a one-of-a-kind golfing experience. The Clyde Johnson design was named one of the top 10 new public courses when it opened, and it also takes full advantage of the natural beauty of the Low Country. Old South is a fun and unique challenge for golfers of every skill level and a favorite of both locals and visitors. Whether it's your first time here or you're a regular, you'll be treated and feel like family. From the bag drop to check-in at the fully stocked pro shop with both men's and women's apparel, to breakfast or lunch before or after your round, the staff is always ready and willing to help. Experience for yourself why Old South is one of the premier golf courses in the Hilton Head area and why it will quickly become a favorite of yours too. Visit them in person or online at www.oldsouthgolf.com, or to make it tee time, simply call the pro shop at 843-785-5353. Today's guest is Dr. Michael Hollis, and Dr. Hollis is a board-certified licensed naturopathic physician who focuses on true preventative medicine. He has an extensive background in athletics, metabolic balancing, and endocrinology, and we get into a ton of things today that are going to be very eye-opening for a lot of people and even jaw-dropping for some. For example, why are so many people in society today vitamin D deficient, even if they're spending a lot of time out in the sun? How much water should you be drinking on a daily basis? Is the food that you're eating the right foods for you, and is it nutrient and supplement and micronutrient sufficient for the activity level that you're performing at and for your metabolic system? Outside of those things, we really go into detail on Dr. Hollis's metabolic profiling system, which goes and unveils the unique layers of imbalance within each of us. And from there, how he subscribes a food and supplement program, as well as a metabolic balancing program, so that all of us can perform at the best and the highest level that we can, whether we're in our work lives, in our family lives, or in our athletic endeavors. So this is just an amazing conversation. He gives so much detail, and I'm sure everybody is going to take something from listening to this show. So please give a very warm welcome to my guest today, Dr. Michael Hollis. Okay, I'm here with Dr. Michael Hollis. Doctor, welcome to Golf 360.
Hi, Pete. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So Well, before we even get into to some of the things we were talking about before we came on, and since this is such a hot topic right now in the country and across the world, can I get your maybe some quick thoughts or input on the coronavirus?
I've been thinking about it a lot. We go to the gym every evening after work, and every evening we have a conversation before we go in there. Should we be doing this? And I imagine that's going to become more of a relevant conversation as time goes on, and people become more concerned about whether their family's going to get this and what to do about it. The easy understanding is, and I could be wrong, but the easy understanding to me is, after giving considerable thought to it, is the coronavirus itself is not the problem. It is the opportunity that getting that virus creates for other compounded infections to take set. So that's why they're having conversations about, how kids are fine. They're just, it's a mild inconvenience for kids, but it's the older people that are having problems because, for us who are over the age of, let's say, 35, I'm not going to say that people who are 35 are old, but older, complications arise because our lungs don't work as well as they used to. We have issues. We have blood flow issues. Some of us have mild cardiovascular disease. We all have degrees of circulatory impairments and pulmonary, which is lung, breathing impairments. And those are the issues that get exploited because, when you get the flu, you often get sinus issues. You often get breathing issues. You often, say, oh, well, it started in my throat and it went to my lungs. Kids don't usually complain about that sort of thing. Some kids do, but most adults tend to have those sorts of complaints. And what those complaints are is, instead of saying, oh, this cold seems to be going to my lungs, what you should be saying, is I think I have a super infection on top of the virus that I have. And that bacterial infection that I no longer can muster the resources to defend against is starting to spread to my lungs. And that is the issue with the coronavirus is, you get the virus and then your immune system goes after it. And all of the armament and the equipment that your body uses in the immune system gets dedicated to dealing with that virus. And guess what? The little bacteria that happen to be sitting in your throat and your lungs, they get ignored and they are allowed to proliferate and they create what we call a superinfection. And those seem to be the things that get the coronavirus victims in the end, is the complications, not the virus itself. So I don't know if that helps people maybe it makes people more worried, but what you can do is you can take measures to address the potential super infections if you feel like a cold or a flu coming on. And, we have some strategies to do that. And, that's what we're doing before we go to the gym. Just making sure that we're dealing with that stuff.
Yeah, and we're going to get into, for everyone listening, a couple of the bigger things that you and I have talked about in the past that help boost your immune system and get away from the things that inhibit it or bring it down. But just so everyone has an awareness of kind of who you are and what you do, you're a board certified naturopathic physician. You deal mainly in hormonal and metabolic, correct?
Yeah, mainly in understanding how the metabolism works and if we need to address the hormone issue, then that's part of it. But actually, it's a minority. The majority is looking at the body as a set of conjoined little machines, metabolic machines that cooperate with each other. And if they're not cooperating, or if there are screws missing on those machines, then we have to address that. And that doesn't always mean hormones, but it can certainly, and again, the easy way to address that is you get older. And if we don't already all know this, most of us are pretty much in tune with the idea that we do not produce as many hormones as we get older. And a lot of the hormones that we do not produce as we get older are the ones that heal your joints and, help you to burn fat, and they help you to repair soft tissue, and they help to keep your bones strong. So, you talk about illnesses of aging. Well, those are illnesses of deficiency. deficiency of the hormones that direct the healing processes. So yeah, that's a big part of it. And I try to underemphasize hormones as best I can, but ultimately when you have somebody who's struggling with their health, you can't ignore it. It's such a big part of healing that it needs to be evaluated. It really does. So we do that.
Right. Yeah, you do it very well.
Yeah.
I mean, I've reaped the rewards. Friends of mine, family members have reaped the rewards, and knowing some of the people you work with, it's amazing that more people don't seek you out, which is good for me, right? Because I can still get
keep
to
it
see
quiet. You know? That's a great thing about being a doctor is you can't tell anybody who you're treating. So,
right.
But that's a good thing. The practice that I've decided to practice less people, more effort. I just find it difficult to see somebody for half an hour once every couple months and not understand who they are, which is it has to be as important as how their metabolic machinery works is who they are. And I think it's always been in me to want to just be an artist at what I do rather than a factory worker at what I do. And that means that you really have to spend the time necessary to understand who it is that you're dealing with. And part of who it is that you're dealing with is understanding what they're willing and not willing to do. Because, you know, some people are just too busy with work or too busy with kids or too busy scraping whatever means are necessary to pay their mortgage or whatever it is. They are so involved in their own life that they can only give so much to this repair process. And the reason why they are in a state of ill repair is because they're devoting their energy and their time to career, family, or whatever it is. And you know what? That's normal. Some people feel, I imagine some people feel a little bit embarrassed to say, oh, I just can't do that. And it defeats them. And it's not really about that. It's just about understanding, okay, well, your resources and your commitments are devoted over here, and you're very good at that. And that takes away from your time to have resources and commitments to be able to take care of certain aspects of your life. And as a result, we either have to keep talking about it and making room for it, or we have to treat you so that, we can help you to balance your life so that you can operate in the lifestyle that you've chosen to live. And so as a naturopathic doctor, which is unfamiliar to most people, and again, that, I'm a licensed doctor like anybody else. It's just I have certain advantages and limitations that are accorded to the specific venue that I do, which is, cause-oriented, generally non-pharmaceutical, although we do dabble in pharmaceutical as necessary. We tend to focus more on how you live and how your body integrates with the environment that you live in. And that's a little bit different than your family doctor who does some other incredible things, but they're just we're in different areas of medicine.
As you spoke to wanting to understand the person you work with as far as their lifestyle and emotional state and everything else that goes into making that person who they are, I think that is largely missed, not only in your field, but in just about any field. I had Bob Stevens was on. You might remember him. He was at ESPN Sports Center anchor. And we were talking about his career at ESPN back in the 90s. And then we got into Peter Kostis, how he got let go from CBS, and how so many things lose sight of the product and they get off into these tangents. And the product in your field, meaning the person. I mean, how do you treat somebody if you don't know what their general life is or what they're going through? You're just going to write a script and send them off and hope that it works. And that seems what a lot of the medical industry is. I shouldn't say a lot. I should say the focus might be on that. And a lot of very good physicians get stuck under that umbrella unfairly.
Well, the first thing that we need to talk about is when I talk about metabolic machinery, that's biochemistry. That's just the chemistry of the body. And that leads me to my point about stress and emotional stuff. Is stress is chemistry. And anybody who tries to separate it from being a chemical response is missing the point. So if we have people who are stressing about their health, then we are dealing with additional chemistry that has to be addressed. We have to look at it. So yeah, it gets missed because it's complicated. And, I will never fail to admit that regardless of complication, you still have to work with it. And it is complicated, and it's complicated for me, and everybody's different. So part of what we do, and you've gone through this, and you're probably aware of other people who've gone through this, is the testing that we do, although it takes a long time for all of us to get the results back. It's all about chemistry. I want to look at every compartment I can that within reason to see how the chemistry is working. And that includes the biochemistry, the neurochemicals of your stress and your emotional response, because I don't want to be defaulting to antidepressants when we're dealing with, somebody who feels overwhelmed or overworked or underappreciated or whatever, because inherently we're all suffering to a degree of overworked, underappreciated, and overextended, and we all have different chemical interfaces to deal with that. And as a result, some of us have less here and more there, and some of us have less there and more here. So, dealing with that is just as important as dealing with any other machine in the body. So,
do you see that as a bigger problem in the last 10, 15 years or so, as we're in the so-called information age, where it's not just you're bombarded with information and emails and texts and phone calls and everything else you can think of. It's like the constant culture or thought processes, what's next? What am I missing? How can I stay ahead of everything? And it's almost impossible in today's world because information is so easily accessible. Have you seen anything in the rise of issues and people being really thrown off chemically, as you mentioned, during as we escalate, as things are going faster and faster?
Well, honestly, as I'm processing that question, I think, well, my answer is that it's just moving around. I mean, human beings are built to want more. And it's wanting more and not having it, or wanting to do more and not being able to do it, that creates a lot of the stresses that exploit imbalances. So whether it's, what are these kids doing staring at their phones all day, or, whether it's, older people complaining about economic instability, and the last couple of days is a good example of that. It'll be really interesting to see what happens to people's stress levels over the next couple of months with what's been going on in the markets the last couple of days. Uncertainty and financial, which is transgenerational. I mean, everybody in every generation experiences a degree of financial stress, and for those who have all the money in the world, there's the stress of being able to trust the people around you to manage you and your financial stuff with honesty and integrity. So there's always the stress of uncertainty that is just part of being a human being. And the generation probably doesn't really change that ongoing breathe in, breathe out stress of uncertainty that happens with all of us. And again, some of us have better alignment of biochemical resources to deal with that, and others have biochemical resources to deal with other stresses and not as well with certain stresses. So again, it's just a matter of trying as best you can to get an idea of how that chemistry is working, so that you can help to, push it in a more apt direction to deal with whatever stresses are affecting one individual to another. So it's just like, snakes and ladders.
It's
you
interesting.
Slide here and you climb there.
Right. You say that there's different stresses. Everybody thinks that somebody else has it better. And I'll give you an example from the golf side is, we do the lessons or the multi-day schools or half-day schools. Everybody comes in and says, oh, if I could just break 80, or if I could just break 100. And it's like, I'll be happy. And I say, let me give you a piece of advice. You're never really that happy, because as soon as you reach that goal of breaking 100 for the first time, Well, now the next one is you want to break 90, and then you want to break 80, right? And then you want to break. So to your point, people are always looking to grow, and if they're not, then what's the alternative? And it seems people might forget that some of the simple and easy things, if they want that growth in their golf game, they obviously want it in their life, and that does create stress at different levels. And those listening, hopefully that from today's talk, that they'll get an idea on how to alleviate some of those, or at least reach out to you and say, hey, here's some of my problems I have. I need your help fixing it. What food plays a very large role in that, does it not? People's diets?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the easiest way to approach that, and it is not the only way, but the easiest way to approach that is depending on your diet. So let's just imagine a plate of food. So let's imagine the most evil breakfast we can have. So let's say, a plate of pancakes and syrup, all carbs. Okay. And fat. That's pretty well what it is. Delicious as it is, what's going to happen after you eat that is your blood sugar is going to go up, and it's going to stay up for probably a couple hours. And the really interesting thing is, if we follow the sugar around, if we were to pilot a little microscopic vessel in your blood system and just follow all that sugar and see where it goes, it'll just keep going around and around and around in your blood system and hope to find a home. And there are easier places for it to go, and there are harder places for it to go. So like your muscles, most guys would love for all that sugar to go to their muscles because it makes it stronger, it makes it bigger, and who doesn't want stronger, bigger muscles? The problem is, once your muscles fill with sugar and there's no more room, there's no more sugar going to go in there. And so if you follow the sugar around in your blood and it's not going into the muscles, you'll find that it tends to go to three major locations. One is it goes back to your liver, and then your liver will try and turn it into something that is not sugar because there's too much floating around in your blood to begin with. That is the hazard of eating pancakes. The second place actually is your brain. What your brain will do with it. And the interesting thing is your brain doesn't have the usual filters to stop it from coming into your brain. So that sugar is just going to stream into your brain. But what it can do is it can just transform it very quickly into neurochemicals, and then flush your brain with neurochemicals. And so let's watch your 3-year-old son eat his pancakes, and let's just see what happens to him. He's going to go bananas for about 15 to 20 minutes, or running around. He's going to have more energy than he knows what to do with. And then what's going to happen is he's going to get sleepy, and he's just going to fall asleep. And that's what happens when kids eat too much sugar, is they get the sugar spike, and then they get the carb crash. So a lot of that has to do, like, the interesting thing is when you're going through that crash, your blood sugar is still high. So it's not that your blood sugar is falling. It's probably that you have blown a fuse in your brain. You've exploited your brain's resources. You made a ton of neurochemicals, and while you made those neurochemicals, they're flooding all over the place, and they immediately get spent to give you a whole bunch of energy to make you hyper and not know what's going to happen next. And then what happens is you've exploited all the machinery that can make those neurochemicals, and they're like, look, we can't make any more. We've used up all of our resources. And then you feel tired. So there you go. There's your connection to the brain and your diet. And the interface is different as you get older because kids are very resilient. They can handle high levels of carbs because their muscles are still growing. So they have that outlet. They have the fat burning outlet. They have all these different outlets. But older adults don't. We saturate our tissues very quickly, and they stay saturated for a long period of time. And as a result, we tend to exploit that brain system more often than normal. And what happens is we start blowing fuses more often. And the brain gets so saturated with carbs that it starts to, nerve cells start to die off very quickly. And so we can't exploit the brain the same way that kids can. And what it does is it affects the balance of the chemicals that we make. If we tend to have fuses that are harder to blow in dopamine, then we'll make more dopamine. If we have fuses that are harder to break for serotonin, then that individual will make more serotonin, then we'll have a serotonin surge. And so one of them will have, an addiction for carbohydrates that is developing because they are exploiting the dopamine pathway, and the other one will feel happy for a period of time eating carbs, but they'll feel miserable afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the serotonin pathway. So, it depends on your genetics, and it depends on how those genetics build the different machines in your body that allow you to exploit these different neurochemical pathways. And it will also dictate how you will feel after you've exploited these pathways and once you've worn them down. Because people who eat a plate of pancakes are just as likely to eat a sandwich for lunch, who are just as likely to have a bag of chips in the evening to kind of wind down and watch TV. Those are all carbs. So we're exploiting those pathways day in and day out, 3-4 times a day. And most of us are not aware of it because we have a mild understanding of, diet and its implications, but for us, it's just fuel. And we don't think about circuit breakers and biochemical machinery, but that's what we do,
So it does affect someone's mental state, or even if they don't know it, it's affecting them on what their desires and happiness levels and so on. But it also has a large effect, I would have to assume, on the gut system, the intestinal tract, the stomach. And
oh yeah, absolutely. That's probably one of the first things that I do is primarily I address the gut. It is the first system with your environmental interface. I mean, you put things in your mouth, and what you're putting in your mouth is intended to give you energy and is intended to build tissues. But it has to go through your gut to get broken down and allow your body to get access to the chemistry and that food to use to repair and provide energy. So, getting older and guts don't really mix very well. And a lot of the patients that I treat have some kind of, gut related issue. So we have people with, chronic heartburn.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a misnomer that we assume we're taking the Prilosec and the different kinds of Tums and things like that to lower our overproduced stomach acid. And actually, that's not the case. What you're doing is you're taking a Tums to stop the normal amount of acid that your stomach's making from attacking the weakened mucous membrane protection layer in your stomach. And so what happens is really what you're doing when you're taking Tums and Prilosec and all those other things is you're weakening your stomach's ability to digest food. And while you're protecting an already thinned mucus protection layer, and really what you need to address is why is it that mucus layer is so thin? What is it that's wrong with that mucus layer that I can correct so that I can eat normally and not have to take Prilosec and Tums and things like that? That's a first step. And, close to 50% of the people who reach the age of 50 have what we call hypo or achlorhydria, which is like really, really low stomach acid production. And that means that any of the minerals and the vitamins and, of course, the proteins, the carbs, and the fats that are reliant on your stomach for appropriate digestion don't get digested and don't get absorbed appropriately. So now you're compounding any metabolic limitations that you had before you started taking your Prilosec and your Tums, and we have to address that. So, but that's just one of the many aspects of the digestive system that need to be just evaluated just to see where you're at. And that's why we focus on doing testing, because I can't just look at you and say, oh, look, your stomach is, not working properly, or, you have dysbiosis, or you have some kind of, imbalance in your gut microbiological flora. You've got to evaluate. You have to have a number sitting in front of you so you can have a real conversation about it. Because, a lot of practitioners out there who don't do testing, they get lost in doing one or two things, and everybody gets one or two things, and it's, maybe a 10 or 20% success rate, because really you're only successfully treating a minority of the patients that come and see you because you're not evaluating them appropriately. So it's really important to do the testing.
So it's like, almost sounds like a vicious cycle, where if you don't eat healthy foods, vegetables and the right proteins and the right carbs, that then the system starts to break down in the stomach and the esophagus, and then all the way through. And then your body's not, even if you start eating healthy, your body at first is not able to absorb the nutrients to rebuild itself. So it's a slow process.
Yeah. And then those tissue become further compromised because, a gut, that big, long, winding tube that goes from your mouth to the toilet, it's a tissue. And so it won't get access to the normal repair mechanisms that it needs if it can't get access to the appropriate nutrients. So, there's probably about 10 different stages. I mean, if I were to go through them really quickly, you've got stomach acid, you have digestive enzymes, you have gut wall enzymes, which are different than the digestive enzymes. You have the immune system that gets rid of viruses and bacteria in the gut that don't belong there, but they also help to get rid of proteins that you haven't digested, which brings us back to the stomach and the heartburn and how you treat it issue. You have what I call the grenades, which is the other part of your immune system that will kill off any viruses or bacteria that are in there, or any undigested proteins that are in there that the first the first immune process couldn't take care of. And then you have your microflora. And then you have your, what else do we have? We have your ability to absorb digested particles, which also is a hormonal related issue. And then we have motility, which is partly your nervous system, and it's partly, your digestive capacity. So we have all these different systems that are just part of the gut. And if one of them doesn't work, then your digestive capacity will go from what is on average about 96%. That means, like, if you eat steak, most people who have a healthy gut digest and absorb about 96%, 95% of all that steak. But if you go from 96 to 86%, that's a huge leap. That means you have a whole bunch of food that you haven't digested that's left over in your gut, that you don't see that steak coming out in your poop when you poop. You have other mechanisms that will help you to digest that, but unfortunately some of those mechanisms are more harmful to you than good. And one of those sort of garbage eating, undigested food digesting mechanisms that you have are the bacterial flora that populate your large intestine, where that undigested steak arrives and gets worked on again by different types of bacteria in your gut. The problem is those bacteria are not used to eating steak. So we have these other kind of closeted bacteria that sit in the margins of your large intestine that will come out and play and will help you to digest that steak. And unfortunately, when those little organisms are helping you out, they also poop these chemicals that get absorbed into your blood system that create a lot of complications. Their poop is not good for you, whereas the poop of your normal healthy bacteria in your large intestine actually helps to feed your gut and keep it strong. So you have these what we call commensal bacteria, which are bacteria that work in unison with you, that work in conjunction with your body and help to propagate health for you. And then you have these marginal bacteria that kind of come out occasionally to help you digest something that just didn't get digested properly, but they make chemicals that are actually harmful to you. So there's a give and a take when your body loses that capacity to digest. And so let's take somebody who's over the age of 50 who falls into that demographic of people whose digestive system goes into decline after the age of 50. And guess what? They're making a lot more toxins because they're feeding a lot more undigested protein or whatever to these marginal bacteria that live in your large intestine. And guess what? These marginal bacteria are so well fed that they're coming out and they're becoming part of your commensal. They're becoming part of the normal bacteria in your gut. And as a result, every time you eat, you pay for it with these chemicals that your body has to spend time and resources on and has to engage the immune system to help to resolve. And that weakens your immune system. It weakens your liver. It weakens all the parts of your body that help to keep you in repair. It exploits all the non-hormonal aspects of your immune system. And that's part of getting old, is aging deteriorates your gut. Your deteriorated gut creates more complications for your other systems in your body to deal with. And those other systems can react in very negative ways, creating more inflammation. They can create things like arthritis and degenerative diseases. So there you go. There's a connection between your gut and your big toe, the gout in your big toe. They're far reaching, but it's important for people to be aware that you can't just say, well, I have a problem with my knee and that's not my gut. So how can you say that it has to do with my gut? Well, here's how it works. Here's the connection.
Yeah. And most people don't realize, I think it's your skin, you get has a full regeneration. Was it every 4 to 6 weeks? You get a complete
Your skin?
Yeah. And
Sounds
bones
reasonable.
were like, God, this is really pulling from the
Much
memory
longer.
banks. Yeah. I think it's
a lot longer.
3 months. But so if you're getting a full bone reconstruction process every 3 months and your skin's rebuilding every 3 to 6 weeks, I mean, if you're filling it with shitty food, then you're going to rebuild it with shitty material. It's like building a house out of balsa wood.
Yeah. But imagine, if we take that another step, we can say, well, by correcting those things, we can see things starting to change within 3 months, which is, for people who are dealing with chronic debilitating illnesses that are potentially reparable, you can get results. You can start seeing changes within a couple months, which I think there are a lot of people out there who are contemplating getting surgery for their lower back or their knees or things like that. That's sort of welcome relief to know that if they put the effort in and they get the right information, that they might see some turnaround in a very short period of time.
Well, I've had a number of friends who've done the Whole30 diet, the 30 days of vegetables, and I think it's very lean protein. And they say within 2 to 3 weeks, they notice a huge difference. And then, of course, at the end of the month, they feel better than they ever have. And then they go
back to it. Yeah, let's challenge the system again. Yeah.
So, let's get it working.
Just like I am. I totally understand where they're coming from. It's just you've got to, once you have a good thing, then you put it in your calendar and make sure you remind yourself, because we do often get, like I said, people are busy, and you can't blame yourself for being busy. You're busy providing for yourself and your family, and you're busy helping other people through your work, and sometimes it makes you forget about yourself, and you can't blame people for that. You were asking me about how times are changing and how things are potentially creating complications for people. One of the things about the time that is a constant is people crave purpose, people crave success, people crave comfort, and those are the basic necessities of being a human being, and it's built into us. It's part instinct to seek food, warmth, safety, comfort, love. Those are weird ways to describe human beings, but we crave those things, and we do a lot of interesting things in our life to pursue that, and often we neglect other aspects of ourselves in order to achieve that. So, it's not just people desperately trying to pay off their mortgage when they're kind of under. It's people, wanting to spend more time with their kids and wanting to make sure their kids have the opportunities and successes that they have, and that means spending more time and neglecting yourself. So, this Whole30 concept it's a great idea, but a lot of people treat it as a 30-day cleanse and forget that, well, there's the other 335 days of the year that they also need to be addressing those issues. And so it's important to remind yourself to get back on the horse, take care of yourself.
You had mentioned about 90 days to get somebody's system back on track. Is that about the norm? And that's just to get the system from, let's say, the mucus lining within the stomach and enough acid to break down food and get the bacteria somewhat rebalanced. And is that what you're seeing, kind of the average?
I mean, 90 days is easy. It's an easy arbitrary, because some people respond a lot quicker. I think it's better to lean on waiting a little bit longer to see results, because part of getting a result and maintaining a result is developing the habit. And I think it really takes easily 3 months of commitment to changing a lifestyle or changing the chemistry to start seeing things really turn around and get into the groove of perpetuating those, that's perpetuating that solution. So 90 days, 120 days, 60 days. In terms of seeing results, it really depends on the individual, and it depends on what needs to happen. So, a good example is you have a patient that you get all your labs in, and you do your report, and you discuss all of your findings, and a lot of what I do is to find agreements with people. So it's really a matter of saying, okay, here's what I found, and let me kind of tell you the story so you understand the narrative from my perspective on what needs to be addressed, and then you give a list of all the things you'd like them to do, and of course either budget or time or commitment come into play. And often what happens is an individual will negotiate what they're okay doing with for now, and then we have an agreement. We say, okay, instead of step 1, 2, 3, and 4, we're going to just do step 2 for now, and let's just see where that goes. And because it's only one of 4 steps or one of 5 steps that we want them to do, it may take longer to see results, or step 2 may not be the best solution for them, and we'll try step 2 for a while, and we'll have to go to step 1. Often it's budgetary and time and commitment that people sort of limit their involvement, and that's fine. That's being a human being. So whether it's 90 days or a year or 30 days, it really depends on the level of available time an individual has to make a commitment to doing all the things that we think are best for that person. And it's okay if they only do one step. It's at least we're moving and we're talking and we're making a commitment to doing something. And if there's a minor success, then we can build that into a bigger success if there's more interest in doing step 3 instead of just step 2, So yeah, 90 days sounds good. It sounds like, it's an opportunity to get things done. It could be longer or it could be shorter depending on the individual.
And that's just to get back to the basic baseline, isn't it? I mean, just so everyone understands, it's not most people are probably their system is such a mess that they'll feel much better, but in that 90 days, you're just getting them back to a starting point.
Maybe, and again, it depends on who we're dealing with. I mean, if I were dealing with, a 25-year-old, and let's assume that 25-year-old is an athlete and has all the inherent capacity to make all the hormones and all the things to build, and they're just missing some things, they're going to rebound very quickly once you replace that item, that machine in their body that hasn't been working properly. Once you fix it and get it working again, you're going to see a very quick turnaround. But if it's like a 70 or 80-year-old, and I don't want to, disparage, getting older is, unhealthy, but there are more challenges. Those hormones that self-repair are there, but they're just not there in a comparatively high quantity that they are in a 25-year-old. So there are going to be challenges. And also, let's be honest, part of getting older is sort of getting on with your life and ignoring some things that probably we should have paid attention to a number of years ago. So we have compounded issues. And so, 90 days is kind of just getting all of those compartments fixed and kind of in a state of repair. And then let's see how much those fixed metabolic machines can help to repair some of the 10 or 20 years of kind of just not really paying attention to something that's been sort of insidious and working against the system for a long time, and let's see how much repair we can get done. And then what happens is after those 90 days, we're like, okay, well, we have a new status quo. You're not 78 anymore. You're 65. Now we have to talk about, okay, well, what do we need to do to move you closer to 50? If it's reasonable, what's missing? And what are the commitments and expenses attached to that? And let's talk about it and see where you're at. and then there's another decision that's made. So yeah, you're right. There are increments in dealing with people. Yeah.
Going back to what you said on how the food, so it affects your entire digestive system. It affects your brain chemically. But the one thing that I found after we started working together that I was having a lot of trouble with before we did was sleep. I mean, and everyone I've talked to who's done the whole 30 was very similar in that they said their sleep just, they actually had a restful night's sleep where they weren't waking up at, let's say, 1 in the morning or 3:30 in the morning every night. But does that have, as we're getting into the brain a little bit and how your diet affects it, the cerebrospinal fluid and how it gets washed away harmful things in the brain while you sleep?
Well, that is an interesting and very complicated question. Let me try and give you some perspective, because the discussion we had before, and again, I'm not a brain specialist, so I'm more of a metabolic. I have more of a metabolic focus in my work, but a lot of it has to do with any organ that the metabolism affects, and the brain is one of them. So let's talk about some interesting things about the brain. So we have the whole pancake issue. So pancake, blood sugar.
God, that's like my Sunday morning cheat.
Yeah.
Once during the week.
Geez, now that I'm talking about it, I have a feeling I know what I'm going to be doing Sunday morning. But that and any other example that causes your blood sugar to go up is going to create complications with the brain. But what we didn't talk about is how consistently elevated blood sugar also affects the blood flow to different parts of your body, and that includes the brain. Remember I said when your muscles are already filled with sugar, the sugar in your blood isn't going to go into your muscles. It'll find the next easiest route, and your brain is among one of those easiest routes. I said the brain, the liver, and there were three things, and I only mentioned the two, the liver and the brain. The other one is the actual blood vessels that feed your organs. The lining is made up of these cells that are like in a weave. They're all woven together, and they create an airtight seal on the inside membrane of your blood vessels. So every blood vessel everywhere going to any part of your body, the big ones, the small ones, even the smallest ones, they are lined with this beautiful matrix of glued together cells. And the interesting thing is those cells that line the inside of every blood vessel in your body, they cannot stop sugar from going into them. They cannot filter out blood sugar. So if you have high blood sugar, more sugar is going to go into those cells, and it's going to cause them to bloat. And what happens when they bloat is some of them occasionally get scarred, and they get fixated into that bloated state. And what happens is in the smallest blood vessels of your body, and that means those that are reaching into your brain, those that are reaching into your muscles, your spleen, your kidney, your lungs, you name it, any organ system in your body, the very smallest blood vessels are basically nothing but that matrix of cells that holds everything together. Right on the other side of that matrix of cells are the tissues themselves. And that's how blood filters oxygen through and nutrients through. And that's how, in the depths of all of your different organ systems, you get this flow of nutrients and oxygen in your tissues. But what happens when those particular cells get bloated is they create kinks in the smallest blood vessels. And what it does is some of those kinks can make it nearly impossible for blood to flow through. So you have these areas that are completely random when you have high blood sugar over, let's say you have pancakes every day and pancakes for breakfast and lunch and dinner every day, and your blood sugar is high all the time. What happens is over time, the bloating and kinking of those protective cells becomes so bad that there are going to be parts of your body that just don't get adequate blood flow. And that means that the tissues that are right next to those areas that don't get blood flow don't get enough oxygen. They don't get enough nutrients. And if that happens to be your brain, if it happens to be your calf muscle, if it happens to be your kidney, then your brain's not going to work. Your calf muscle's not going to work, and it's going to get really sore when you go and try to run. And your kidneys aren't going to work. So, and it's a completely random thing. From one person to another, anybody can be affected by this in different areas of the body. And that's why all of us have our little Achilles heel. Some people have bad shoulders. Some people have bad knees. Other people have bad hearts. Other people have dementia at a relatively early age compared to other people. It's because the completely random effects of these continuous effects of high blood sugar affecting the blood vessels, it just affects different areas for different people, and those areas become deficiencies. So when we talk about, I did the Whole30 and my sleep is better, well, that's interesting because, when you do the Whole30 or most other types of diets that focus on different aspects of food, but generally what they do is they try to correct eating too much of a particular thing, including sugar. What happens is your blood sugar starts to normalize. And after about 30 or 40 days of normalizing your blood sugar, some of the resilient blood vessels unkink, and they actually start to operate normally, and that improves blood flow. And when you talk about cerebrospinal fluid, cerebrospinal fluid is kind of a filtrate of blood. It's fed by blood. So the tissues that create the cerebrospinal fluid use blood to create fresh cerebrospinal fluid, and then it flows to different areas of the brain and provides a certain amount of protection and food and whatever. So when you correct your blood system and your blood vessels start to unkink and they start to expand and contract like they're supposed to, your blood pressure starts to go down. So when you go to sleep, you're able to get normal blood flow to your brain. You're able to remove blood that's been used from your brain, so your brain gets cleaned out and your cerebrospinal fluid gets cleaned out, and suddenly, guess what? The chemistry of your brain starts to work, and you can get better sleep. So it can be as simple as that, or it could be as simple as saying, the blood that drains from your brain and your other tissues is drained through your venous system, and it's a very interesting part of your circulatory system, and it works very different than your arterial system. The arteries pump blood to the organs. The venous system carries old, bad, crappy black blood from the system so that it can be carried back to your liver and cleaned out. And the venous system tends to bloat and warp a lot. I don't know what other word to use other than saying it creates pockets like aneurysms. But if I say aneurysm, everybody's going to think about getting a stroke and stuff like that. But
right.
Think of a hemorrhoid. If anybody's had a hemorrhoid, you'll know exactly what I mean. That's a bloated vein. That's a vein, a pocket of a part of a vein that just balloons out, and while all the other parts of the vein are working pretty much normally. And you can get hemorrhoids in the brain. You can get hemorrhoids in your bicep. You can get hemorrhoids in your kidney area. And nobody talks about this stuff, but a lot of people who have these different, and I'm going to use hemorrhoid because it's the best term that people can envision. When you get these bloating hemorrhoidal areas of your venous system, what happens is blood accumulates in those ballooned areas and it doesn't flow. And when you have a ballooned area that has, black used blood just sitting there, imagine all the tissues that surround it are being congested with this really used crappy blood. And when those tissues get congested with that kind of blood, it doesn't allow new oxygenated blood from the arterial system to enter efficiently. And then what you have is pockets of areas of your body that have low oxygen. And when you have low oxygen, those tissues seize up. You ever get a cramp? You got a hemorrhoid in that whatever muscles getting cramping all the time. And it's no surprise that people tend to get more cramps in the lower parts of the body, like the calves and the legs, than they do other parts of the body, because that's the area where blood tends to pool the most. That's a hemorrhoid of the bottom part of your legs, for lack of a better term. And so, interestingly enough, when you go on a diet and you eat less food and you start to normalize your blood pressure, what happens is those balloons get less exploited and they start to return to their normal size, and you stop getting those hemorrhoids. And then what happens is your blood starts to flow, and that can happen to your brain. And that could be a reason why you're getting better circulation in your brain, you're getting better sleep. So it's a very long answer to a very quick question, but it's important for people to think about stuff like that. Your circulatory system is so important, and it is such an important factor that joins with all the other metabolic machinery. You need your circulatory system to carry out digested materials from your gut and transport it to your liver, because your liver needs to take those nutrients and process them so the rest of your body can get them. And the way that your liver feeds processed materials to the rest of your body is your circulation. And if your circulation doesn't work, then your liver's not going to work and your gut's not going to work. But you need to be able to evaluate all these different things to say, well, I know your liver's not working very well, but I think it's your circulatory system that isn't carrying blood effectively. So it's really not your liver. It's really your circulatory system that needs work so that it can circulate bad things through and good things out of your liver so that you can start getting this process of cleaning your body out. So, it's never just saying, oh, well, your gut's not working, so let's work on the gut. Well, maybe your gut's not working because you're not carrying nutrients out of your gut, and that's a circulatory issue. Mm-hmm. And that's what we do with testing. We're trying to flush out where do we need to pay attention to. So let's not get stuck on one thing. Let's make sure we're working on the most important thing right now and see how much working on that one thing affects all the other systems that are aligned together that process nutrients and create energy. And that's how we create a system that works.
So it's not just getting to the cause. What I'm hearing you kind of say is that there could be a number of different causes, and where you really excel is identifying which cause will, at that present time, give the biggest bang for the buck if you've got a couple different causes going on.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best way to put it is, I spent my career asking those questions is, well, and then what? My patient has arthritis. Okay, so I'll treat it with an anti-inflammatory. And then what? Well, the process of creating the arthritis is still there because all I've done is mask the ultimate physical factor that the patient's complaining about. So there's an and then what that I haven't addressed. So, okay, well, let's talk about what's causing the inflammation, the immune system. So let's try and address the immune system. And then what? So let's go deeper. What's causing the immune system to get tripped off? And my career has been just 20 whatever years I've been practicing and then whatting everything and just going as deep as I can. And then once you've kind of exploited all the things, you have all this mess of different variables sitting in front of you. And now you have to try and find a way to organize it. And so let's take this and then what, and what system does it belong to? Okay, so it belongs to the hormone system. So let's just start building some foundations here and start creating a system for the hormone system so that we can evaluate it and we can see where every patient's at and we have a conversation about it. And then let's talk about these other things. And then we get these, I've so far put together 6 basic systems and they're all aligned together. So the gut is a system. And the gut, all the blood that comes out of the gut that takes all the nutrients that the gut has processed feeds into the liver. That's another system. And then all the processing that happens to the liver gets flushed out into the circulatory system, which we just talked about, the arterial system and the venous system. And they're all connected in the liver. So the circulatory system, the cardiovascular system, the heart attacks and the strokes and things like that, all of the things that have to do with the circulatory system and the heart and the brain and all those different things are connected to the liver. And then the circulatory system is, of course, it's connected to all the tissues, like the muscles, the kidney, the brain. So we have that system. And interestingly enough, we have a barrier between the circulatory system and the organ systems, and that's insulin sensitivity. And so that's a system. And I picked all these things up over the years, and we just connect them all. And once they're all connected, we can evaluate them. And once we've evaluated those systems, then every individual and me, we get to have a conversation about which of those systems needs the most work. And there, somewhere in there lies the condition that person came with. Oh, well, I have, high cholesterol and I've had a bypass. Okay, well, let's talk about that. We know that system resides in the circulatory system, but let's see what's been feeding that problem for so many years. And it might be from the gut. It might be from the liver. It might be hormonal, who knows? But the numbers will tell us, and then we can have a conversation and not get lost in treating one thing deep in the middle of nowhere. We can treat a big system, and then we can see what kind of result we get, and then we can address the other systems too as we're treating. So it's a complicated process that's just been filtered for many years into some really simple conversational things. And the great thing about keeping it simple is we can all talk about it. You can be an accountant. You can be, you can be a golf pro who's really good at what you do, but has not had time to go into all the biochemistry and all that stuff. But you know what? When we put these things into systems, we can all talk about it because it's dinner table conversation, and we can make sense of it, and we can walk away from our conversation feeling like, okay, I think I understand some really important things about the way my body works. And so when I suggest something like, diet change, or or to your example, the Whole30 or something like that, somebody can say, yeah, I can kind of see how that can work. I'm willing to buy in for a little bit. Whereas, if you go into a doctor's office and they just say, oh, your cholesterol's high, I want you to do these things. Like, I don't think the buy-in's there, because I don't feel like we've had a real conversation about me and understanding how I work. And I don't think I can attach any feelings to this idea that you're saying that I have to avoid eating meat for the rest of my life, and I can't eat, I have to eat a low-fat diet. It's like you've taken all the joy out of my life. With all the responsibilities that I have, taking care of my kids, paying for their tuition, investing in their future, trying to pay my mortgage, trying to keep my wife happy, trying to keep my household happy and my life happy. I have 20 minutes free every day to take care of myself. And I don't see how there's any joy in taking away the 20 minutes that I have to sit down and snack on something that makes me feel like my life is worthwhile. And you're taking that away. You're taking away my steak. You're taking away my potatoes. You're taking away my butter. And those are the things that, just make me relax. It's the nightcap to my day that's full of responsibilities. And you're not giving me a reason for it. You're saying my cholesterol's high. What does that mean? And you're giving me a medication that's supposed to be keeping it low. So why do I need to make a change in my diet if you're addressing the issue? And people usually go home and say, screw that. I want my steak. I deserve my steak. And
I've earned it. Yeah.
Yeah. And so the conversation with looking at the systems is, keep the steak, but let's for 30 days just see how you feel when we take the potato out and replace it with, broccoli and cheese. And you're like, I can do that. It's fair trade. I'll get my satisfaction. And if I get results, then I'll come back and we'll talk some more. And then at the end of those 30 days, there's improvement in this area. And then we say, okay, so let's see if we can substitute another thing. And here, I'm going to give you something to take, and let's see what the next 30 or 40 days will produce, or whatever time it is that the patient wants to kind of work through this habit change. And ultimately, at the end, we're looking at how does a patient feel about their life and all of their responsibilities and their rewards in their life and all that stuff after this, and see if everybody's happy. And if they're happy, then I think people are more motivated to say, well, okay, what's the next thing? I want to see what I can do. And now part of the joy is making the change, rather than just saying the only joy I have is that 20 minutes and that steak and those potatoes and that big stick of butter I put on my potatoes. It's more like, man, I've lost weight. I feel better. I have more energy. And you know what? It's created 40 more minutes where I can kind of spend time and take care of myself, because everybody's happy. They see I'm happy, and suddenly the work of, making this tuition, this saving for tuition for my kid to go to college, they're more motivated because they're less pissed off because I'm not telling them to clean up their room as much, because they're happier. Their dad's happier. They're a little bit happier. They're cleaning up their room on their own. And it seems like things are working out a little bit better. So I have a space of 40 minutes instead of 20 minutes. I'm like, okay, we've got more time to work with. And if eventually we get to 60 minutes or 90 minutes, then we can send them to the gym, or we can give them some other things to do, which are going to make them even happier. It's
an incremental process.
Yeah. And you just can't assume that I am the therapist and I have the final say in these matters. I think you have to say, I'm the therapist, I have an opinion, and that's about it. And if you bring yourself back to saying, well, all I have is an opinion, then you have to work a lot harder to make sure that your opinion has merit in the life of the person that you're dealing with. And it's taken me, 22 years of worrying about whether I'm capable of offering an opinion that's of value to somebody, and worrying about whether or not what I'm saying is worthwhile to the patient and they're getting results, to, I think we're moving to something here. And now I have a system, and now I can provide the patient with choices. I can give them a list of choices, and I can create a narrative that creates a very comfortable tabletop conversation or dinner table conversation where it's really a matter of talking about numbers and about things that everybody knows. We can talk about blood sugar, we can talk about cholesterol. Everybody kind of understands that now. So we can have a really good, meaningful tabletop conversation about it, and I can give them a convincing narrative and give them some choices, and then they can choose on their own. And I can say, well, you can do that, but I would say if you're skipping number one, I understand it's more expensive, but it might get you to that place in 30 days where you have some more time and more better resources to feel better and to get things done in your life. So you may want to just spend the extra $100 and try the number one. But I understand, like, if $100 is just not even feasible, okay, let's do number two, and we'll just see where we can get, and we'll talk about it in a month or two, and see if we can progress. The only risk there is that if a patient chooses the cheapest option, and it is the least potentially effective option, that you lose them, and unfortunately, you just have to accept that that might be the case,
With, Hippocrates, I think he was the one that said, "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." So
he
food,
did.
right? Yeah, so food obviously plays a big role.
Yeah.
But can you speak a little bit to food production methods in today's world? And is that what's contributing to making people sick?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'm sure it's a big part of it. And remember, food be thy medicine. There are some limiting factors there because some people have, they were brought up with certain types of food that are hard to let go of. There's a lot of emotional, family tradition stuff attached to that. So that does make it a potentially very touchy and difficult conversation, even though people will say, "Oh yeah, sure, no problem. I'll take the pasta out." Their mom still lives at home with them. They're taking care of their mom, and she cooks every day, and pasta is just part of their tradition. It's going to be very difficult. You realize there's a dynamic there. There's a socioeconomic, and there's a tradition, and there are emotional attachments to both. So there is always that piece that you always have to be sensitive to, and you have to forgive it if somebody says, "I couldn't get rid of the pasta," and it's like, okay, well, we'll just have to work on that. But to the other point is, the pastas that we're getting is a good example. The bread that we're getting, all of these things are made of wheat, and I'm gonna abandon the whole conversation about wheat and how bad or whatever. We can talk about that a little bit later, but if we think about wheat, we know where it comes from. We have the whole heartland of our of America that's dedicated to growing and producing wheat, and the practices and methods of growing and producing wheat are rife with limitations. And the easiest one I can do without starting conversations about the Monsantos of the world and fertilizers and all that stuff is you got to look at the soil. A plant has a root system. The root system goes into the soil for a reason. It's looking for water. We've pretty well got that down. We have sprinklers and things like that to provide water, but it's pulling things out of the soil. And if you were to find soil that was chromium deficient, I'm going to just use an example. We take chromium out of the soil. We just try and grow wheat in an area of the planet that has no chromium. You're still going to be able to grow wheat, but it will probably be shorter, and it will produce seeds that are less viable because, again, the seeds come from the plant. That's the whole purpose. The plant grows to whatever 4 or 5 feet or whatever. Those seeds are designed to perpetuate the existence of that crop of wheat. But if the soil can't provide chromium, that means the seeds are going to be chromium deficient. And that means that instead of 1 out of every 3 seeds, I don't know what the ratio is, will fall to the ground and grow new plants. Maybe 1 out of 30 will. And so let's imagine we grow seeds on this chromium deficient soil, and we refine them, and we make flour out of them, and we feed them to people. That means there will be a relative deficiency of chromium in our diet if our dietary staple is wheat. And so then we have to ask, well, what are the metabolic consequences of not having chromium in our system? And we know that chromium does play a role in how we manage our blood sugar. And guess what's in wheat? Sugar. We don't call it sugar, we call it starch. But I tell you right now, we have enzymes in our mouths that make bread taste a little bit sweet because those enzymes break down the starch in the wheat and turn them into sugar. And that's why when you chew on bread doesn't taste that great on its own. But if you keep chewing, especially white bread, you'll find, that's not too bad. It kind of tastes sweet. Well, that's the enzyme working on it and turning it into sugar. So what I'm saying is, when you're eating the product of the wheat, you're essentially eating sugar because by the time it gets to the parts of your body that absorb nutrients, it becomes sugar. And guess what happens when you absorb sugar through your gut? Your blood sugar goes up. Guess what happens when your blood sugar goes up? You better find a home for it pretty soon, or it's going to go to your liver and it's going to destroy your liver, or it's going to go to your brain and it's going to destroy your brain, or it's going to get caught up in your blood vessels and it's going to destroy blood flow. And all of those are essential to you to become a healthy older person. And if you ignore those issues when you're younger, you'll grow old faster. And guess what plays a really important role in that? Having a little extra chromium in that wheat delivers a little extra chromium to the engines that pump sugar from your blood into your tissues. And if those pumps don't work very well, then you're going to have higher blood sugar and you're going to get diabetes a lot quicker than other people are. You can see the relationship. So let's talk about iron. Let's talk about magnesium. Let's talk about manganese. Let's talk about all these minerals, and let's talk about all the vitamins that we find in these different food items that we grow in the ground. And over time, if we start, growing on soil and taking the iron out of the soil and putting it in the seed, well, the seed's not going back to the earth. It's going into a manufacturing facility and it's going into us. And we're not, and when we poop out a lot or pee out a lot of that iron and magnesium that we got from those seeds, it's not going back to that soil. It's going into different reservoirs and different groundwaters in areas probably not in proximity to that soil. So the minerals that we extract from the ground as human beings are not going back to the areas where we want to regrow those wheat grasses and things like that. And so those wheat grasses are becoming deficient, and all the vegetables that we grow on different areas of the land are becoming deficient because we keep extracting minerals from the soil, but we don't put them back. And there was a study that was performed, and I'm going to get the date wrong because I can't remember these details very well, but I think it was around 1952. There was a study done where they took a bunch of vegetables from different, the farms around the country, I guess. Maybe they took them from around Pennsylvania where they did the study, or wherever they did the study, I don't know. But they measured the minerals in these different food items, and they published this data. And what I found interesting is somebody had the great idea to redo the study I think it was around 2003, and they did the same methodology. And I'm going to use the worst example to illustrate my point. Green peppers, I think they measured iron in green peppers in 1952, and it was whatever A was, I can't remember. And what they did was they said, how many green peppers would you have to eat today to get the equivalent amount of iron from the green peppers that were grown in 1952? And I think in 2003, it was 39. You had to eat 39 green peppers to get the nutrient value equivalent to one green pepper in 1952. And again, I'm extrapolating the worst example. So, because I'm doing this because I want you to hear this example and just understand that we are on some plane of gradation of depletion in all of our minerals relative to the amount that was grown in soil that was a lot more fertile in 1952. And they redid the study in, I think it was 2014 or something, and the number was 43, not 39. So 43 green peppers to get the same nutrient value.
Worse.
So, well, of course, I mean, it's math, until we find a solution to that, repopulating the soil on a national level, like on a national level, we're always going to be drawing more minerals out of that soil faster than it can be replaced by, rainwater and whatever such mountain water reserves that are collecting minerals from the mountains and dribbling them into our lakes that are feeding these irrigation systems. And that's just one thing.
And
So,
even
yeah.
flooding, right? We're flooding. You have like the Mississippi River or a delta of any river will flood. And while
Yeah.
it can be and is catastrophic for housing and
Mm-hmm.
anything else in that area, it is what develops the soil. It brings in new nutrients and everything that soil
Yeah.
needs, doesn't it?
Yeah. It would have 200 years ago, but we have a spillover once every decade or something, and in the meantime, we channel that river directly to the sea by creating these irrigation systems to allow us to build homes in areas that were otherwise drenched with rainwaters and overflows from Mississippi. But that, we put dams on rivers now. We put dams on lakes now to um, even the flow, which is a great thing for society. But it also selectively feeds soils now in various elements of proximity to different rivers, and it's not as prolific as it used to be. So, less feeding of the minerals to the different areas and higher levels of exploitation by commercial agriculture. You're going to have these limitations, and is that a good thing? It's a good thing. It's a good thing that we're doing because we have too many people to feed, and in order to house those people, we need land. We're doing the right thing. It's just we're paying a consequence, and there will be a consequence to potentially our fertility at some point, which is nature's way of kind of saying, okay, now we put a cap on it.
Right.
You can't grow anymore because there are no more nutrients to feed your reproductive system. So there we put a cap on it. But the quality of life for the amount of people that are on the planet at that point that nature has finally found a way to put a cap on our reproductive might be to such a point that we're fighting wars over water. That's your vicious circle. I wish we were organized enough and maybe friendly enough from a policy standpoint to say, okay, how can we come up with a diplomatic, friendly way of saying, hey guys, we got to do something about our population. We don't have enough resources for everybody, and we know what's going to happen. People are going to be very unhappy, and they're going to start fighting with each other over resources. And what can we do to, from a health standpoint, from a policy-making health standpoint, to say, hey, let's have happy people rather than miserable people. And what do we need to do as an organized society to figure that out? I don't know what that is. It's a fine line between having a happy solution being the villain in all the movies that we've ever seen about the bad guy doing these horrible things to control population of the world.
Right.
And nobody wants to be in that group.
Is it best to get your food then from, let's say, your local farmer's market or co-op or anything like that?
I would love to say an unequivocal yes, but I don't know how equivocal that is, because no matter how organic our approach is, we're still growing on lands that are have selectively available nutrients. And I think it's a step in the right direction in terms of our happy policy making, because it's helping to raise awareness of how we need to make better use of our land and maybe create a better environmental approach. The most fascinating thing you can watch on TV is to see these organic farmers who grow chickens on their land to eat the trimmings of the bushes and poop and create fertilizer, and then have the farmer take the topsoil from the chicken coops and distribute it among the different vegetables that they grow. It's a fascinating thing to see those micro ecologies working.
Mm-hmm.
That would be wonderful for us to inform, policymakers and the general public of how these systems work, and see how our scientists, who are the brilliant minds of our educational institutions, go to work on that knowledge and say, hey, here's how we can apply this to a larger population, and here's how we can apply this as an alternative to maybe the Monsantos and things like that, as a more positive way to perpetuate our population. It'd be great. But how do we do that? I don't know. But organic is to me maybe not as effective a tool for day-to-day eating as we think it might be, which is a sad thing. And I don't know, maybe I shouldn't say that, but it is a more effective thing in helping to raise awareness and help to have a discussion with our policymakers and maybe take different views on agriculture and perpetuate that on a global scale.
So it as far as the farming industry, it's more about the depletion of minerals and all those things within the soil more so than it is. Did they have to use some type of spray to keep the bugs down in this region or whatever, weeds out? All in all, it sounds like the where it's coming from, meaning the ground.
Well,
is leading to a lot of that.
It's again about asking and then what. We can say, oh well, spraying is bad, but if you keep and then what, going deeper into the cause is we're feeding too many people, and we're having to find ways to make growing crops more efficient because we can't afford to lose whole sections of crops to bugs. And we just don't have the time and the resources. We don't have the policy agreements to be able to say, no, we're going to take our losses and we're going to grow what we can. And we're going to try and find alternative ways to deal with the bugs by growing complementary plant systems. No, because then we have to manage that. And then we have to send one person out to go and manage that. And we can't use our big agricultural machinery methods, which are very efficient and very cost effective and very good institutions for feeding large masses of people. We can't do that. We have to go and send people out to pick the weeds, and we have to go out and send people out to manage the complementary plant systems, because I can't take my machine out and just clear cut everything, and I can't sort through what is the grain, what is the seed from the plant that's going to infect the crop, that's going to cheapen my provider system, and people aren't going to pay for having mixed seeds and things that they're going to have to sift through. So no, I can't do that. But if I clear cut a sprayed crop, I can make a business out of this, and I can make money. We're stepping on toes of institutions that we, as a large, dense population, it's not fair for us to have a right to say, oh, well, the farmer should do that. Well, you know what? You're eating what they're providing you, and they're barely making it. They're barely making enough money to survive. So the complaint is, well, let's stop them from farming. Okay, well, then where's your food?
Where are you going to eat?
It's a circular argument. And I think if people are more aware of where they fit in that circular argument, maybe they have more of a diplomatic way of approaching, okay, I'm going to buy my wheat, I'm going to be happy, and let's talk about the cause. And let's find ways of talking about it diplomatically. And the cause is we have too many people. Per unit area of space, we have too many people to have nature. We simply don't have enough space for nature anymore. We have too many people to feed. And if we don't feed those people, there's going to be war. There's going to be revolution. There's going to be uprisings of people who are miserable not getting fed, and they're going to fight people for food. We have a whole system that we have in place for this, and it's a good system for what we have. And as a naturopath, I'm educated and informed enough not to say, well, as a naturopath, I think we should, not use Monsanto. I don't have a say in that. And as a naturopath who's informed, I don't have a say in that. All I have to do is maybe I can help people understand the system better. And if I can help people understand the system better, we all know how we fit into the system. And we're all more informed, and we all understand each other a little bit better. And so rather than having a violent yelling and screaming episode about it, as a naturopath, I'm yelling and screaming at the institutions. What I can say is, let's try to understand the institutions, and let's be more fair-minded about these things. And then maybe we can talk about, well, what can we do to be more thoughtful about our population? And what can we do to be more thoughtful about what we've done to help to provide for that population? And then I can leave it alone and accept that I may die 3 years before my natural time. because I accepted that I live in these policies and institutions to help give a happy lifestyle to all these other people that I share this space with. And I can't argue about that. And I have to give my 3 years away to that. Or I can say, I really want to live 3 more years. What can we do to change our policies to allow those of us who are living right now to live 3 more years? And then we have to change everything to accommodate that.
I was having a discussion with somebody not too long ago, and we're talking about this and the foods and how it's grown, and they were like, well, the average age that people are living now is much greater, and my argument to them was, well, is it people are living longer, or is it just that as they come up with those numbers that the infant mortality rate is now much less than it used to be 30, 40 years ago? So if they're taking the average and people are living to, let's say, average of 75, but you're increasing the age of the youngest people that are dying, well, won't that increase the average age lived?
Yeah, maybe. But again, if you just dig down and keep asking and then what, you get this global picture of things. And the global picture is, we are doing some great things to help keep people living longer. Whether they're living happier or longer, I don't know. But we're doing that, and at the same time, those older people are still contending with a lot of the environmental influences that are killing us off. And we can have conversations about that too. Like Michigan and Detroit and the water issue there. What if we took that story about the lead in the pipes and the diversion of
Flint,
right? Yeah, and then the diversion of potable water from one system to another, not realizing that there are things in that water that we can't easily remove through our usual sanitation systems that are affecting these people. But you can also argue that and there's so much PCBs and industrial runoff in these lakes that it's impossible to drink out of them, and that's true. But that Lake Michigan is not the only lake, and it's not the only water source that is equally being exploited by industrial runoffs, and we haven't reached, like, globally. And when I say globally, I mean throughout the United States, we haven't reached that point yet where people are getting illnesses at such a rate that it is worth going after all of those global systems. But it may be pretty soon. It hasn't affected our mortality to such a significant rate yet that it has caused such an alarm that we're willing to go after stuff. But there are other global concerns. Other global concerns include we are growing. Our population is growing at such a rate that there is a density of population that's creating certain types of stresses that occur when you live in population densities. We are more aware of certain socioeconomic disparities that is creating a lot more stress when you live in large urban populations, that people are seeking outlets for that. And it is those individuals that have biochemical uniqueness, not weaknesses. They have fortitudes in certain areas, but areas of exploitation in other metabolic areas that are becoming more susceptible to the dopamine issue, which some people are exploiting food, but other people are exploiting drugs. And those drugs fall into the opiate pathways and things like that are causing enormous upheavals in our population that are often not considered as an effect of these population densities and the shortcomings in our food supply that are not allowing those genetic areas to be properly fortified, and they're becoming weaker areas, and they're becoming exploited in certain populations that are creating these opportunities for people to get exploited by these drugs and becoming addicted and becoming this sort of industrial microcosm of illness. When we talk about industrial runoffs, population density is kind of an industrial runoff because it creates a demand for technologies, it creates a demand for industries, and those industries and our policies, which are inviting a lot of those toxic industries back into the United States because we're no longer doing the same amount of business we're doing with China, which, to the good fortune of America, has been our industrial runoff for the last 30 years. we've been able to exploit that. And I think China is basically saying, no more. We can't do that anymore because people won't even come to our country because it's so polluted.
Right.
And what they're doing is they're trying to implement global policies that limit the amount of runoff. And what that's doing is it's directing it back to the United States, which means we will see a solution in a shorter term because our population is going to react to that when we start seeing this runoff affecting our population, which is great. It's a great way for a population to come full circle and start making these changes. And that's when we'll start having more health influence, when people, as you know, at the dinner table are saying, look, I'm tired of the air that I'm breathing. I'm going to talk to my people about it, my friends about it. And then their friends happen to be politicians, and their politicians are saying, you know, what my constituents are saying. They're saying there's a problem with the air. Let's deal with this. And I don't care. No amount of lobbying is going to overpower the opinions of people sitting at their dinner table complaining about the air that they're breathing, you know, and we're inviting that back to our global atmosphere. And so, you know, it's about 10 years away where I think a lot of the people that are like, I don't know if this whole over farming and soil depletion thing, I don't know. They're going to be saying, you know what, I'm sick. And you know what, my best friend who farms the land and, you know, he's barely surviving, you know, I don't want to take his lifestyle away because he's a good friend of mine, but he and I both agree that we have to find better methods. And if we find better methods, he'll still be employed and he might even make more money. But we have to change the institutions that kind of feed these soil depletions and air toxicities and gunk management systems. And you know, what's interesting is when people start talking about it, big corporations start to listen. They're like, yeah, you know what? Let's put some money into that. We want to make you guys happy. Let's put some money into it and let's see what we can do. And then my job, I become obsolete.
As we're discussing the depletion of minerals and things in food in today's world compared to 40, 50 years ago, has that led, do you think, to the rise in the supplement industry? To where if what
I think it's led to a rise in the argument for the supplement industry.
Okay.
You know, I've always wanted to approach McDonald's and say, hey, you know, when you sell that Big Mac, wouldn't it be great if you could say for an extra 25 cents instead of upsizing your drink? Why don't you pay an extra 25 cents to upside your nutrient value? And here's a multi that you can take with that. I think that would be. I've given up on approaching McDonald's. I think maybe if I just put it out there, maybe, you know, Burger King or something will come along and say, you know, it's not such a bad idea. And then they can just offer that upsizing option. Do you want to add a little bit of nutrient value to that meal to make sure that you're a little healthier? I'm sure people would pay an extra 25 cents for that. But yeah, I think, you know, if per capita people have more complaints about their health, people are going to inevitably want to explore areas other than just what they heard from their doctor, what they got in their prescription. You know, people are going to want to hear. People are going to think like I am. They're going to want to ask questions like, "Why am I taking this pill?" And you know, most doctors are a little bit skittish about saying this is why, because honestly, I think most of us doctors are a little bit like, all I know is I've been told this will help you, and I just want to help you. And this statin, I am told, will help to prevent you from dying of heart disease, and that makes me feel good, knowing that I could participate in that. But I think that doctor might go home and say, "Is that it? You know, I got that." You know, they might think, you know, I got that information from a drug rep who coincidentally did their Bachelor of Science in sociology, as I am aware now that I sat down and spent some time with them and spoke with them about who they are. And I don't know how good I feel about somebody who got their bachelor's degree in sociology is talking to me about biochemistry. I don't know how I feel about that. And maybe I want to look into that. And maybe I want to do some of my own research. And in doing some of that research, they might find that statins may not be as productive and effective as they thought. And that might want to lead them to explore other avenues. And that doctor might then, out of their capacity to care for their patient who they are developing a relationship with, say, yeah, well, here, I think you should do this because I I believe it helps you, but there may be some other deeper issues that you might want to look into. And so you may want to explore some supplements. Or if the patient said, what about this supplement? The doctor might, instead of saying, no, that's all a bunch of bull crap, they might say, well, I would encourage you to explore that, but I don't know definitively if it's going to help you with this particular concern. Maybe if you do some reading into it, and then that might lead that person to explore a naturopathic or an alternative practitioner like myself to ask those questions to and say, I'm taking a statin. How do you feel about that? And I have these questions about alternatives and I want to know more about them. Can you provide me with it? Can you provide me, I'm an accountant, or can you provide me, I'm a sociologist, with a level of narrative that I can understand at my dinner table to convince me that maybe there's some other avenues to treatment. And I'm like, okay, you know what? I spent the last 22 years of my life trying to find ways to talk to you at the dinner table. So here's what I got. And so I think it grows out of a public just raising public awareness, just public themselves raising their own awareness about alternatives to hearing things, in the periphery about, how vitamin C might do this. And we have a lot of people to thank for that. We have people like Linus Pauling who make it their purpose in life to inform people. We have all kinds of other PhDs and scientists who made some discoveries who make it their purpose, to their detriment probably, because they get the level of scorn they get from the mainstream medical institutions. It isn't worth it. But they do it anyways, and they devote their life to informing the public about, how vitamin D can be helpful, how vitamin C's, how diet can improve things. And they all go through this gauntlet of public institutional scrutiny for years until the public realizes, you know what, that stupid diet over there is the one that saved my life. And I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I did the Atkins diet. I'm glad I did the Pritikin diet. I'm glad I did the Whole30 or whatever. There's all these different kind of theories that are developed by really interesting people who have great ideas that are really trying their best to flesh this idea out in public to see if other people did as well as they did on that program. And they write books and they put themselves out there. And guess what? 30 years later, we're doing modifications of the Pritikin diet and modifications of the Atkins diet. And all these new diets that come out are just different ways of presenting some of the basic ideas that these institutional pariahs have been trying to devote their lives to informing the public about. And so there we have it. Yeah. Absolutely.
As far as supplements and what people should take, I mean, outside of someone talking to their golfing partner or friend or someone in their group, is the only way to really know what they need through the blood testing, similar to what you do, the very thorough, complete analysis?
Yes, and maybe a lot of dinner table conversations. I'll give you an example. It was about 12 or so years ago now. I was in practice in Santa Monica, and we were treating a professional surf team in Hawaii, and we did all the testing that you're talking about. We did it all, and they were all vitamin D deficient, which is crazy. I mean,
being outside.
What do surfers do? Yeah,
right.
They're just outside all the time, and that you can't not start thinking about what you do and what you do not know when you see situations like that. And it really led me to think deeply about vitamin D, its purpose, and how it works. And you know what? When I sat down and just thought about the whole vitamin D issue, it was plain as day why it is that people who are on surfing teams are vitamin D deficient. So here's how it works: your body makes cholesterol, and when your blood system circulates that cholesterol to your skin, and the interesting side note on that is, remember, blood flow as you get older is not as good as when you're younger. So blood flow to the skin as you get older is not going to be as good as when you're younger. So let's just imagine you're younger, you're on a surf team, and you've got all this cholesterol that's floating around in your blood, and it's passing through your skin, and incidentally, you're in the sun. Here's what the sun does to that cholesterol. it modifies it. The ultraviolet radiation from the sun modifies the cholesterol by adding a hydroxyl group to it. And that is the first step in turning it into vitamin D. And then what happens is that vitamin D, most of the stuff that gets converted is coincidentally being released by your sebaceous glands in your skin onto the skin. It's part of the oil that your skin makes. And of course, we make more of it as we're younger because we have better circulation to the skin. And we have more of this, what we call the hydroxylated cholesterol is now called provitamin D. And what happens is that provitamin D is now moisturizing your skin. It's moisturizing the oils of your skin. And it needs about 72 hours for it to get reabsorbed into your skin so it can be turned into vitamin D by your liver and by your lungs. It has to go through that three-stage process in order to create vitamin D. Skin, hydroxylation, provitamin D. Liver, which I can't remember the process, whether it's the liver or the lungs first. It has to be further modified by the liver and then further modified by the lungs, and then it becomes active vitamin D. So what happens to that surfer? First of all, they're in the water all the time, so they're washing sebaceous oils off the skin. I know that it probably sticks to the oils stick to the skin a little bit better, but hey, you're in the water all day. And then what do you do when you get out of the water? You go and you take a soap and water, you just shower. You take a shower. And what happens to the oils in your skin? It gets washed off. And then you go out and guess what? You're vitamin D deficient because you've stopped that process. And you got to remember that process is the caveman process. It goes back to us when we were running around not taking showers all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that people are getting skin cancer more often now? Probably because as of around the 1950s and 60s, we started taking a shower every day. And only recently, because we get sweaty when we go work out, we take another shower. So often people who are the most physically active are the ones who probably take more than 1 or 2 showers a day. And what happens when you do that? You wash all that vitamin D off your skin, and your skin has no more protection because that vitamin D ultimately is what goes back and protects your skin from ultraviolet radiation, and it prevents cancer. So there we go. We're all vitamin D deficient because we all take showers. And for a lot of us, we take more than 1 shower a day. So, if you're talking about your clients who play golf, probably they may take 2 showers a day. They take a shower in the morning, they go play golf, and they take a shower when they're done, and off they go. And they're vitamin D deficient.
Are there other things that you see as far as supplements on a whole where people like vitamin D is one you just mentioned? Some of the reading I've done over the years, magnesium, zinc.
Yeah, it's huge.
Really big. Yeah. And I even tell some people, and you could tell me if I'm way off base, but magnesium as far as when somebody's trying to learn something, whether they're changing their swing or their stroke or course management, what have you, the importance of the magnesium in the neurogenesis side of learning.
And everything. Yeah. And magnesium is everywhere. You just imagine all of the little metabolic bottlenecks. They're basically like, think of it as a conveyor belt. It's a big, long car building process, that conveyor belt. And you put one station puts a door on, the other one puts the hood on, the other one, puts the tires on. There's just a multitude. And you can imagine if one of the guys doesn't show up for work, you get a car at the end of the process without a wheel on it. It's not a car. You can't sell it. and that guy you got to find a way to replace that. So if you have the great thing about the auto industry has usually 10 or 20 lines going on at once. So if one guy calls in sick, you've got 9 other guys that can kind of jump between the lines. And even though it slows the process, you can still make it work. So imagine a metabolic process is very similar. You have different machines, little metabolic machines that process your steak and turn it eventually into an amino acid that feeds your muscles. And then you have all these machines in your tissues that make the muscle. It's a big, long conveyor belt. And imagine if magnesium is a critical part of 5 or 6 of those machines, and it doesn't show up for work. And you have only 9 other lines. That means that some other metabolic process has to slow down in order for the magnesium from one metabolic process to find its way to this lineup to do this thing. And that's what a deficiency is. It's not a complete absence of anything. It's just how many different conveyor lineups does the iron or the zinc or the magnesium have to jump between in order to get that metabolic process done. And as you get older and these deficiencies become more prominent, those metabolic processes slow down even more and you get older. So you're blaming your age on that deficiency if you're not managing that deficiency, whatever it is. And magnesium is very common, but it isn't everybody that has a magnesium deficiency. And to add to that, you can't take a lot of conventional magnesium supplements because they are notoriously bad for being absorbed appropriately. In fact, if you take too much magnesium of certain qualities of supplements, they will give you diarrhea, which means you lose magnesium in an effort to take magnesium. And so if you notice you take magnesium supplements and you go to the washroom and your usual constipation is no longer constipated, well, I'm telling you right now, you may be creating a subsequent deficiency of magnesium by taking that magnesium supplement because it's so hard for your gut to absorb that it's creating what we call a reverse osmotic environment. And that's causing what the magnesium that's not being absorbed is doing is it's sucking water out of your body. And great, you're taking your constipation and making your stool better. That's great. But what it's also doing is it's pulling minerals out with it. And it may, in fact, be pulling more magnesium out with it. And that may actually create a relative deficiency in magnesium when you're taking that magnesium supplement. So it's really important to make a decision about the quality and kinds of magnesium you take to make sure that they're being absorbed properly in order for you to actually create a net increase in the amount of magnesium that your body holds on to. And again, these are things that's why we test. There are all these little things that you have to be aware of it. And it's just the blessing of getting older and the blessing of being a craftsman in this industry makes you second guess everything you do constantly. And it makes you think constantly about the consequence of your decisions that make these programs for your patients that create consequences in your patients. And the more you think about it, the deeper you go, the more and then what's you ask yourself, you start realizing that you have to be more careful when somebody comes up with, say, a magnesium deficiency, how you approach it, because you can't give half-assed advice. You can't have a very quick, uninformed tabletop conversation about magnesium deficiency. You have to make sure that you fully inform your patients of the merits of taking the proper treatments for the magnesium. And again, the treating the magnesium might just be treating the gut. And that, so that's why we come up with these systems and we create narratives and we have good conversations about them, because when a patient walks away feeling like, I feel like I got what I was looking for, and I'm dialed into that, and I want to try some of these things and see how I feel. And, it's a real blessing when you can walk away and say, I think I just brewed up a little curiosity there. And I think I have somebody who wants to try some things, and that now I can help.
Yeah. It's amazing how many people they don't want to take the time or effort or maybe even spend the money to talk to somebody like you, but they'll listen to their friend, right, who just did some trial and error, and then they'll get on Amazon or whatever website, or they'll go to their local supplement store and they'll buy, let's say, magnesium, and it could be taurate and glycinate or whatever magnesium, and then next thing they know that they can't get further than 15 feet away from a restroom. And that doesn't work. So, okay, well, maybe you didn't take the right one.
Yeah. But that is a money thing, though. Like when you say they'll take their friend's advice, it's basically, people don't want to say it. It's a money and trust thing. That's why, you build a practice on referrals. You don't build a practice on marketing. You just don't. And I don't want to participate in it, because you want people who feel comfortable spending the money. And that means that they've had a trust experience with a practitioner. That usually means that their friend went and got results. Because there's a lot of practitioners out there, and there's a lot of really bad ones. Just like there's a lot of really bad lawyers, and there's a lot of really, really bad, golf coaches. There's a lot of really bad. People just don't. They're not craftsmen. They were never informed that having a profession was being a craftsman. It was about making money, and you choose. And you can only hope that kids, when they grow up, have exposure to the difference between people who put money above the interests of their craft. And that we have kids who are exposed to doing things that they just love to do, and that they're allowed to do those things. It's really sad when you grow up in a family where there are things that you love to do that the influences in your life do not approve of. They deny you the opportunity to explore your creative side and your craftsman side, and you're driven only to make money because it's the only approved resource of occupation that you are nurtured into. The important thing is that you find a craftsman, and the only way you're going to do that is to have an advocate help to inform you that, oh yeah, this guy really loves what he does, and he's been doing this for a long time, and he's really good. I would highly recommend that. And then people are more willing to say, well, good, because I've spent my money 3 times now on people that I was not happy with, and I'm just reticent about doing it again. So all I can do is encourage anybody out there who's in the practice of medicine, do us a favor and love what you do, or do something else, because that'll mean that there will be more faith in what we do. People will be more open to coming and sitting and having an open mind about, talking to us about stuff. But unfortunately, the world doesn't work that way. And so I rely on people like you to, talk about your own experiences. And if your experiences aren't good, then I can only hope that I'll get a second chance to make it better, or I won't have you as a resource, and my craft will not be accessible to your circle. So. Mm-hmm. Hence me, I worry about it, and I have been for 22 years, and that's why I always dig. I'm always digging and learning, and it's a never-ending process, and that's what makes a craftsman motivated.
The probiotic industry has seemed to garner or gotten a lot of attention of recent, let's say 5-7 years. Does that go along the lines of the supplement industry and the growth, or is it along the lines of the nutrient deficiency of food because of what we talked about in farming practices? Where does that come in? Because we talked earlier about good versus bad bacteria in the system and which one is used for digestion. But where does the probiotic
probiotic
supplement come into play?
On the scale of daily vitamin and symptomatic treatment lies somewhere in the middle. It is not a cure. And it should not be a daily supplement. You can make it a daily supplement if you want. It's not a problem. It's just, you're not treating the cause. I promise you. If you're taking a probiotic, you are not treating the cause. You are, it is less harmful than taking an anti-inflammatory for your sore knee. So I'm not saying that it's harmful. But if you've heard the term SIBO before, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth of bacteria. If you take a probiotic for SIBO, you're perpetuating the problem. You're not solving the problem, and that needs to be heard by every practitioner that is gung ho using probiotics on other patients. It is a great supplement, but it is not a daily fixture. And I'm sorry to say that if there's somebody listening here who owns a probiotic supplement company, because I don't want to poo-poo anybody, but I am responsible to the patient. I'm not responsible to them. I am responsible for sharing my experience dealing with these things. And I give probiotics to my patients. So the industry is safe from my perspective, but I'm doing it while we're working on other things. And the way that your body exploits its bacteria is it has to be fed. Meaning, if you have dysbiosis, and for dinner table sake, dysbiosis is, okay, your colon is where all that stuff is. Okay, it gets fed the scraps. It gets fed what you can't digest. And thank goodness you can't digest fiber, because that's what the whole concept of those colon bacteria are for, those large intestinal bacteria are for, is they work with you because they can eat your fiber. They can eat it. And they turn it into acetates and butyrates and things like that actually feed the strength and integrity of your gut. That's why they are probiotics. That's why they work for you. They work synergistically with the human body. You'll never get rid of them. They're always going to be a part of you. They're a part of you. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem is if you eat too much, or if you cannot digest what you eat because you eat too much of certain food that you just don't have the capability to digest, what do you think is happening to that food? It doesn't just drop into your toilet. That's why most of us don't see whole big chunks of vegetables. We don't see whole big chunks of meat just dumping into our poop in our toilet. It's because all of this bacteria that's in your gut is there to help you to digest it and stop you from having big chunks of food plunking into your toilet. The problem happens, like I said before, when you feed that bacteria, when you feed your colon or your large intestine, whatever you want to call it, food other than fiber that hasn't been digested in quantities that allow these bad bacteria to emerge, because those bacteria, those bad ones, are the only ones that can digest particular foods that are not fibrous, that are protein, or that are fatty foods that haven't been digested. That's when they come out to play. And if you feed them consistently enough, they will overtake that entire colon or that entire large intestine, and they will dominate the population of bacteria. And that's when you get what we call dysbiosis. And if you have trouble digesting food and the large intestine, you start growing all these bacteria, and the population grows to such a large extent, they will start to migrate into the small intestine, where they generally do not belong, as long as there is that food that they like so much sitting around the small intestine too. Guess where all that undigested food comes from? It comes from the small intestine, where it was supposed to be digested, where it wasn't digested. And that's when those bacteria start to grow up and up into your small intestine. That's why we call it small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, SIBO. That's what it stands for. You can tell right now, I've told you what the cause is. And if you're listening, it's not take probiotics, because those probiotics are going to populate the small intestine, because guess where they come from? You're taking them in your mouth. And they're just going to perpetuate that problem. That's why it's so notoriously hard to treat, because nobody thinks about the cause. The cause is inadequate digestion or overfeeding. If you put too much food in there and you can't digest it, SIBO is going to inevitably come if you consistently provide those undigested foods.
So it's kind of can be, if probiotics kind of are a good thing, it's too much of a good thing, or being used improperly to address the wrong problem, which can exacerbate it.
It can help, though. If you're not going to change the problem, at least it'll help. Mm-hmm. Because it's better to replace the bad bacteria with good bacteria. At least you're giving yourself a fighting chance. And while we're correcting the gut, I'll recommend a probiotic. And if somebody wants to stay on it, I'm not going to say no. It's just if I think that somebody's radically changed everything and they're doing okay, I would say, well, you don't really need it anymore, but you can take it if you want. And that's my thumbs up to the industry. I'm trying to help you guys. It's just, I'm also responsible to the patient. So it's an extra $30 a month or whatever that maybe they don't need to spend. So I'm certainly there to help them save money if they want.
In today's world and society, and as people look to be better at whatever they do, whether they're playing golf or another sport or just life in general, be more productive, efficient, there seem to be a fair number of diets, since we're talking about food and the gut overall, that, like keto diet or carnivore diet or intermittent fasting. Are those things helping because it either reduces the amount of food people eat, which can somewhat balance out the intestinal tract, or are they just taking luck that they pick the right one, and for their condition it seemed to help, but it is not, again, addressing the issue?
I think pick the right one is a good answer. The keto diet is if we keep inventing what, and then what, and then what, and then how, where did it come from? Where's the cause? When we talk about diets, there's a root for that. It was around 1954, 1956, I think, when the food industry and the American Medical Association, American Diabetic Association, one of those associations basically said, hey, we're seeing more heart disease. Here's what we recommend. We did some studies on rabbits, and we fed them cholesterol, and they died of heart attacks. And from that research, which was, I think the author for that was like this guy, Russian guy, Tchaikovsky or something like that. And he basically took vegetable oils and fed them to rabbits, and he took cholesterol and fed them to rabbits, and they saw that the cholesterol rabbits were dying. And so the Ansel Keys, I think, was the main doctor, head of, I don't know if it was American Heart Association or American Medical Association at the time. Of course, I was born then, so details are vague. But he basically sat along with a panel of other doctors and said, animal fats and cholesterol cause heart disease. And we're proposing the new American diet. And I don't know if it was the Pritikin diet specifically that they named, or if it was just the new food pyramid rules. But it basically says we're going to minimize meat by replacing it with fish. We're going to minimize bacon and eggs in the morning by replacing it with Kellogg's cornflakes, cereals, or whatever. We're going to replace all these things. We're going to replace butter with margarine. We're going to replace all these different things to get rid of cholesterol, to basically get rid of cholesterol and to reduce red meat. And the interesting thing is, and so here's the evolution of diet. So they proposed this new diet program, and people were following it. And actually, it was adopted wholeheartedly by a good friend of, I believe, Ansel Keys, or one of the members who arranged this American revolution in diet, or American revolution in heart health. And he said, I want to take this on. And he belonged to this men's club in New York. I think he was a former senator in New York, or something like that. So he's a really well-known name. And he got a whole bunch of his buddies, and he says, hey, I want one group of us to go on this new diet plan, and I want the other guys to stay on their old diet. And they did it for 6 months. And I think within the 6 months, this guy died of complications of diabetes on this new diet. But they I think they continued the study for a little bit, and then they tallied the numbers, and tallying the numbers, they found that the people who were on the regular normal diet, more of them lived, and more people on the new American Heart Healthy diet died. And it was just completely upside down, and they thought, it's just a fluke. So they continued with this American Health diet, and I think they did. I don't know. I think it was in Syracuse, or it's vague to me because it was such a long time ago that I was reading about this. But I think it was in Syracuse or somewhere upstate New York. I could be wrong. Please forgive me if I'm wrong. But what they did was they actually rented a warehouse, and they did a pilot. They furthered this pilot study and did it a community-wide. I think it was like on a huge scale, and I think it was like tens of thousands of people where they did this thing, and they stockpiled all these items that were heart healthy items, the margarines and the cornflakes and or whatever have you, and the fish or whatever. And they put a large group of people on this program because they wanted to publish the data and encourage people to do heart healthy stuff. And of course, they have all these industries built around it, which would help, American economy and whatever. And they stopped the study, and they did. I believe they did publish the results, but they did not publish them. It wasn't front page news. Let's just put it that way. And this is my understanding when I read about it. But I think they did it for about a year or so, or maybe a couple of years. And they found that more people were dying of complications of heart disease and diabetes on the heart healthy diet, and people on the control group, which is people eating the normal diet, were not dying as much. And so they thought, oh God, this is a mess. And they ended the study because obviously it was costing a bunch of money to do this. And the results were published, but they were not. There was no fanfare, and I don't think people really ever got exposure to them, because I think a lot of doctors who were like really buying into this idea of the heart healthy diet, it sounded really healthy, were confused by the data, and were like, well, maybe we'll just do another one at some point in the near future, and we'll prove this maybe an aberration or something. But so a lot of diets evolved from that. the Pritikin diet developed very soon after that. And basically, I think the Pritikin diet was an extreme version of the heart healthy diet, where they all but eliminated all but 10% of fats, and they replaced all of the remaining calories with beans, fiber dense food calories, and that was intending to follow up on this keep your cholesterol low rule, and it worked very well. But it created in a segment of the population who did it, it created its own set of issues. People were losing too much weight and feeling tired all the time, and there was obviously some core element there that was missing. And then there was another group that kind of went the other way, and that was the Atkins diet. And they said, well, forget that. Let's just eat your steak and eat your fats, but just no carbs. Keep your carbs below 40 grams if you can, 80 grams if you want to just kind of coast. And that guy died because he slipped on some ice and hit his head in the concrete and died of complications a couple of days later or whatever. But he lived to 80 plus years old, and he was, for all intents and purposes, perfectly healthy. So a lot of there's conflicting theories between these two sort of staples in the industry as to whether it's the carbohydrates or whether it's the cholesterol and fat that's causing the problem. And what I believe is that some people do well on one or another, often because of limitations in their body's ability to modify the nutrients that they consume. So a good example is if you put somebody on an Atkins or keto diet and you measure and you keep track of their cholesterol and it doesn't seem to go down, then I believe that those individuals have issues that with the liver and its ability to transform, which is what the liver is. It's a transformer. It takes bad stuff and turns it into hopefully good stuff, or it'll take bad toxic stuff and turn it into something that you can pee out, get rid of real quick. And as a transformer for calories, the liver transforms high blood sugar into cholesterol. And then when it reaches its genetic limit of cholesterol production, it continues to transform, but it doesn't transform using cholesterol. It transforms and creates triglycerides. And it can do the same thing with protein. It can transform a protein into a carbohydrate if the demand and the necessity is there. So if you have somebody that goes on like a protein power diet or
like a carnivore diet,
yeah, and they're eating like a gram of protein per pound of fat, a pound of body weight kind of thing, which is very common, 30, 40 years ago. Here's what happens. You can't use all that protein at once, especially if you're getting older and you don't have hormones to acquire and build that protein into something, which is, why it's a problem getting older. What happens is your liver has to look at all of that extra protein that you can't use and has to transform it into something. And your liver is really good at transforming if it's healthy. And what it will do is it will train itself. It will program the liver it'll program the cells in the liver to build equipment to more efficiently transform protein into carbohydrates. And then you can deal with the carbohydrates. Then you can send it out, and if the body doesn't want the carbohydrates, you can transform the carbohydrates into cholesterol. And if the body doesn't use all the cholesterol, and you can transform it into triglycerides. The liver as a transformer, if it loses its capacity to do one or any of these things, or has genetic limitations on doing one or any of these things, will limit your body's ability to do these radical diets. Radical meaning, in order to give away some calorie, like in order to give away the carbohydrate portion of your calories, you have to make up those calories with some other form of food. And that's when you start pushing the limits of your body. The limit isn't often your gut. The limit is more often your liver when it comes to large quantities of certain types of food. However, your gut is a limitation if you have like a gallstone. Then you can't digest fat, and then your gut becomes a limitation. If you're, having an enzyme problem, then you can't break down your protein, and then that becomes a limiting factor. If you have an enzyme problem and you can't break down starches, then that becomes a limiting factor. And we see that with like people with cystic fibrosis, where the fibrosis of the tracts of the organs that make the enzymes no longer work, so they can't make enzymes, so they can't digest their food. So then it becomes a gut issue for those people. So you can see how these diets have limitations, and you have to, by testing, you can learn some of your limitations, and you can apply a diet appropriate or scale the diet appropriate to the needs of the individual. And that's why, on your report, you had certain scalings in terms of your therapeutic diet that were necessary not to overexploit limited capacities in your metabolism. If you overexploit stuff, you blow a circuit and you get problems.
Yeah, you get your own chemistry out of whack. The balance is lost.
Yeah.
What about water? Yeah, there's so many different theories on you need to drink half your weight in ounces, or you need to drink.
Don't listen to it. It's bull crap.
Okay.
If there's anything that I think is more bull crap than anything else that I've learned, is this idea that people need to drink a ton of water. If the strategy is, if we can occupy your mouth and your stomach enough that you're not eating, it will help you lose weight. I can see how it makes sense. It's just a lot of work to do that. But yeah, I can see that. The strategy of drinking ice water takes more calories. Mm-hmm. Oh, come on. Yeah, you're right. But you're right to such a low degree that the minute benefit that you're getting out of that and the minute degree of caloric response that you get to that does not replace the encouragement of somebody to go out and play and have fun and be active.
Is it just better to drink throughout the day, but before you get thirsty? Because is that part true, that once you're thirsty, you're probably deficient in water?
No, only if you're highly active. If you're running a marathon, you got it. You better hydrate. If you're running around the block 5 times, what? Okay, I was going out on a walk with a couple friends of mine on the weekend, and I saw 2 people who were running around. It was like a little lake that we walk around. It's about a mile each time you go around. Mm-hmm. And they were wearing backpacks with water in them. And I just thought, I hope this guy is doing 80 laps, because that's a little bit ridiculous. We've gotten to the ridiculous in terms of hydration. And there are times when hydration is very important. It's very important when you're running, 10 plus miles. You're especially on a hot day.
Yeah, if you're playing golf and it's 90 degrees out and you're outside for 4.5 and 5 hours, I would have to assume that. Yeah.
Water convects very quickly in heat. It convects off of your skin into the atmosphere. And the great thing about living in Florida is you do get some of that back, because there's a lot of humidity. Mm-hmm. So the need for you to drink water, living in Florida, will be less than somebody who lives in Arizona. Because when you convect water, and you do convect at a fairly rapid rate, especially when you're hot, you convect it very quickly. If the environment around you doesn't help you to add that back when you breathe water in the air into your lungs, you're going to have a problem, because there's going to be a very quick net loss. Then drinking water makes sense. But if you're living in New York or Florida during the summertime, it's not as big an issue. But you probably still need to hydrate, but your body's, you're going to know you're going to want to rehydrate. But if you're running a marathon, don't be stupid. You get your water pack and do all that stuff. If you're, because it's going to do a number on you, especially because in the process of convecting that water, you're convecting salt and minerals. And the salt and the minerals is the way that your body traps water in the body. And that brings me to the other point that I wanted to make is everybody's body is a little bit different. Everybody's chemistry is a little bit different. Everybody produces varying amounts of hormones that initiate the water holding process. And there are a couple of hormones in particular that help you not to pee out water, and also help to limit the amount of water that you convect through your skin. And those hormones, coincidentally, work primarily on helping you to retain sodium. And Every sodium you trap in your body traps 5 waters. So think of it that way. So if you can't hold on to sodium, if you don't have the hormones in your body to hold on to sodium, you're going to get thirstier a lot faster. You're going to get dehydrated a lot faster than other people. And you're going to need to manage that situation by drinking water. The problem is if you drink water on a regular basis when you're not physically active, when you're just day to day, and you read this book on water, it tells you to drink 5 gallons of water a day. Here's what happens when you don't have those hormones to retain sodium. You'll be constantly peeing out that water, and you'll be constantly peeing out that reserve of minerals that you have. And again, because you don't have a lot of those sodium retaining hormones in your body, your mineral reserve is going to be lower than the average person, which means by drinking 5 gallons of water, you're actually going to create, you're going to be dehydrating yourself in the long term, and you're going to feel miserable.
So you actually dehydrate by drinking more because you're flushing your system.
If you are that constitutional type, yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. Because you're overtaxing a limited resource in your body. Mm-hmm. That hormone has limited activity on your kidney. That means your kidney has the capacity to retain X minus 5 amount of sodium compared to X, which is normal. Which means if you keep pushing water through there, you're going to pull some sodium with it. And that's a great thing when you have too much of that hormone. This is a great way to push sodium out of your body, which you're trapping too much of. But, the people who need to drink water the most are going to be the ones who are the most dehydrated. And those people are probably going to be the ones more likely to have that kidney limiting issue, not the kidney excess issue. They're going to be the ones that flush out their remaining minerals with too much water. And they're going to be the ones who feel are compromised by it. So you have to think about these things. If I were a doctor with 2 years experience, I wouldn't think twice about it. I'd say, body needs water, put some more in there. It seems like it's a good idea. But the more you learn about these systems, you learn that there are exceptions and that you have to look at the individual. You can't just make a blanket statement. And I'm offended. I'm offended by a lot of people who write books about drinking more water because they just don't understand what they're talking about. And I'd be thrilled to see if they actually even have a reference in that book, And I've been shown books by people, and I'm just like, God, it's ridiculous. I'm sure that they don't take into account the individual.
I see that we're in all fields. Like you just alluded to the water and people, and I see it in the coaching, teaching industry where someone will come up with a theory, and they'll say, everyone can benefit from this, and they'll use tour pros, and look, this person does this. But then you have a completely opposing theory, and that's, okay, well, these tour pros do this, and they're both highly successful. And what I'm getting at is, I think where all this information is going is getting back to the simplest thing, and that people are individual. And certain things work for some, and they don't work for others, even though it does work exceptionally well for others.
And opposing theories are amazing. Mm-hmm. Opposing theories are what keep us in check. And I wish, the one wish that I would have is that that every person that has a great idea has enough faith in themselves not to think that it's the only idea they'll ever have.
No, there's just too many different people in the world.
Yeah, and the problem is people with great ideas get so emotionally tied to it they're not willing to abandon it, especially when it starts making them money. And what I have learned over the years is when I had my first idea, I thought it was it was going to change my life, and then I thought about it some more, and the more I thought about it, the longer I left it in my pocket, the more I panicked about it because I thought somebody else would come up with the idea. But the more that I doubted it, the more conflicting information and reasons to apply exactly what you said, the individuality scenario to it. And I wish people would do that more. Is if you have a great idea, have a little faith in yourself and put it in your pocket for a little while. Spend some time ruminating about it. Spend a year ruminating about it, because if you come up with enough arguments against, then it is to your betterment that you never came up with that idea in the first place. Because we have people with huge ideas devastate our population. We talked about the opioid thing before. I mean, that's an idea that somebody came up with, and they marketed the crap out of that idea. And look what happened. Look what is happening to big chunks of our society, because they made an effort to make their idea a big idea, and they pushed it, and they made doctors prescribe these opiates, and look what kind of damage has been caused.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, at the other end of the spectrum, look at, you know, a guy like Steve Jobs, who came up with a great idea about personal computing, and he stuck with it, and he fought for it, and he pushed it. He pushed through bankruptcy, and he created one of the biggest industries in the world on his own, through all the revile of his peers who couldn't stand him because he was pushy and he was arrogant about his idea, and he wouldn't let up, and he would not accept anything but perfection. And he took a company that was in bankruptcy for a while,
right,
and he turned it around and made it the number one company in the
revolutionized what, three industries.
Yeah, that's a great, and that's a guy with a great idea and a great visionary, and it just happened to be good from the beginning. But if it was a bad idea, he would have fought for his life for that bad idea, and it would have caused more harm than good. So, you know, the ideas about water, you know, like, just think about it, please, before you write a book, because you think you're the guru of water. It's just like, if you're the guru of water, then your book is going to be a cautionary note, and it's going to talk about different individuals and how well they can do with water, and how other individuals will do by checking their water. Yeah.
I want to touch on one last thing, because I know we're winding down on time. Talking to a lot of my friends, and this is mostly people over 40, I'm going to ask if it goes back to the nutrient deficiency of soil and food and so on. That's TRT, testosterone replacement therapy, for some who might not be aware. How is the food industry and what it's lacking? Is that why testosterone in so many people is deficient now compared to our parents and grandparents of decades past?
Absolutely not.
Okay.
No, I would love to. It's great. It would be great if we could create a scapegoat, but everybody's had it. It is no different than it was, 10 years, 15, 20, whatever. I think the only way that we can tie food, industrial agriculture into this is, 100 years ago, we didn't have cornflakes and all of the things that evolved from processing grains from that point forward. I mean, it wasn't until about 1908 or something where I think it was Charles Weston or something came up with the idea of cornflakes and put into practice the commercial refining of grain types to the degree that we see today. It was before him that we were starting to mill bread, but we were milling whole grain bread. It was a different quality of bread. And so you have to take into account, like, what were people doing? Your grandparents and your great-grandparents and their great-grandparents, what were they doing every day? They were not sitting around in front of computers like we are today. We're sitting more. Their lives necessitated being on their feet and more active, using their hands and their legs and their brains until they were much older. The advantages that we have today, though, are we have medications and interventions for certain chronic diseases that they did not have access to at the time, that allow us to enjoy our life to a more fruitful older age than they might have. But that none of it involves testosterone. So if you can give up work in your office, and if you can offload the caretaking of your children to another family member or to a surrogate, then you will have free time to go out and conduct your life like most of your great-great-great-grandparents did. And as a result, you will less likely see certain types of degenerative diseases that are characteristic of low testosterone into your older age. Less likely. You will still see them, but they will not hurt you as much as they do people today. And there is the rationale for discussing hormone replacement. And if we ignore that, we are ignoring the principal elements of discussion of the value of replacing hormones. You have to understand how people live today. People have more obligations today because we can't make a single earner income and pay for housing and pay for appropriate rearing of our children that we could even 70 or 80 years ago, let alone 100, 150, 200 years ago. We do not have access to the resources today because I think people are no longer willing to accommodate a house out in the woods and have a 2-bedroom apartment style home where all of our children live and grow up in the same room and the parents have their own room. We are not conditioned to live that way anymore. So we work harder to comparatively live comparative to our neighbors and their neighbors in a reasonable degree of luxury that is appropriate for our place and our income and our family size. And it is those things that occupy us day in and day out. We no longer have surrogates to rear our children. We no longer have wives that stay at home to rear our children. Or for that matter, we no longer have a free spouse, a male or female, whoever, to stay at home and raise the children because we can't afford to live in, most of us can't afford to live in the household that we think is deemed appropriate for our socioeconomic status. So we have 2 parents that work really hard, sometimes even more than one job, in order to support a family. And those parents are now more responsible for taking their kids to and from school, after school programs, extracurricular. The schools don't do that anymore. So now the parent has to occupy any free time that they might have had with rearing and overseeing their children's upbringing. And it leaves very little time for people to take care of themselves. So now we're not working in the garden. We're not working the fields. We're not outside hammering nails. We are inside, working harder, sitting at our desk, doing our consulting, forging our craft, whatever it is, in front of our computers or in confines that don't allow us to be more free and active. And as a result, we start seeing the hazards of age more quickly as a result of us sitting in chairs and doing our discourse through less mobile means. And those are the reasons why we need to think about hormone replacement, because the hormones are low. They were always low at the same age. It's just they're affecting us because we are confined to living our lives in a different way than we might have been confined to in 100, 150, 200 years ago. And so the need for a new approach to compensate for our lack of ability to be active and responsible for our physical well-being, we need to rely on other things to help us, to maybe encourage us to do more activity with the short period of time that we do have, which is very difficult. And I can say that, I spent 2 years of my life doing a writing project that I promised myself I would do, and I knew that I needed to give up going to the gym to do it. And I did it for 2 years, and it was very, very difficult for me to get back into doing the gym when I had completed that project, because it was 2 years of my life where I basically came home from work every day and sat in front of a computer until I went to bed at night. I did it. I was really happy to get the project done. It was something that I wanted to do probably for 15, 20 years since I started beginning practice. But the toll that it took on my body, I don't think I would ever do that again. I would never do it again. Irreversible things that you just can't undo. And a lot of it had to do with cardiovascular changes that occurred as an accommodation to me sitting down for that long. I lost so much. And I'm not the only one who does that. I know that a lot of people who are just have to do that in order to pay to exist and to pay to have a future for their kids. They're going to need hormone adjustments in order to find and make good use of free time when they have that free time. And you know what? Often people don't have it until they get their kids gone and off to college. And guess how old they are? Most people these days are in their 40s and their 50s. And it's really hard to come back from a generation of rearing and effort to make sure their kids have a chance. And they still have work responsibilities and responsibilities to their family afterwards, because they still have to keep paying tuition and whatever, paying into retirement. So they need help, and there's no reason why they should not have access to it and get tested and see what's going on, and then talk about it and have a good narrative about their the possibilities and what they can be responsible for, and doing it in a safe way.
And that's if they can't siphon off X amount of time to get to a gym or get outside and do some physical activity?
Well, at that point, it doesn't matter. You go to a gym and guess what's happening? Uh, you got to understand, like, if you can envision a muscle, that muscle has blood flow. That muscle, after 3 years of, or, your whole kid's upbringing worth of sitting and working your butt off, the ability of your body, you know what it's like when you've taken the summer off when you're a kid and then you go and you try out for the soccer team or whatever, and just getting your legs working, it's like 2 weeks of pure hell.
Right.
The pain and the arch, it's just, even as a kid, you know what that feeling is like. And you also know that feeling happens when you go to the gym for the first time, when you've taken a hiatus. You just got to go through that. It's 2 or 3 weeks, just misery. But once you get through it, what's happening is when you don't use a muscle, your blood will allow it to live, but it will not allow it to perform. There's not enough blood flowing through there anymore at this point to allow it to perform. And you have to go through that 2 or 3 weeks of using it again to create that incentive for blood to flow through that muscle. But then there's the other part of it. While you're trying to get blood to flow through that muscle, you also have to provide nutrients to get the fibers of the muscle to grow stronger, to accord itself to the amount of activity that you are now engaging in. That is another process. You have to feed it oxygen, you have to feed it nutrients. But once you get those nutrients into the muscle, you have to be able to tell those nutrients where to go and what to do. And if you don't have hormones to do that telling, you're just going to stockpile a bunch of nutrients and they're not going to grow muscle bigger and stronger. And so what'll happen is, if after the age of like 40 and your kids are off to school and you're finally going to go to the gym, you can open up a certain amount of blood flow to that tissue, but not the same way that you could have when you were 20, because the blood system isn't as compliant. It does not have the hormone underpinnings to open up, create new blood vessels, to penetrate deeper into the muscle, to allow it to store resources and to allow those resources to build into new muscle. So what happens is you go to the gym and you work out for a little while. After 3 weeks, you feel like, okay, I think I'm getting my wind back. I'm going to do a jog and turn it into a period. Like, I'm going to do intervals of running and stuff. Or you take a cycle class or you do whatever. And then you pull a muscle. And you're like, oh, geez, now I got to take 3 weeks off. Take 3 weeks off and you go through the whole process again. You pull a muscle again. It's like, okay, enough is enough. If I have to keep doing this is miserable and I don't want to do it anymore. Or what you do is you engage in activities that are much lighter, like walking. And then that becomes the limit of your participation in taking care of yourself. The reason why you're having those problems is because you still cannot sustain adequate blood flow. And people would like to argue with me about this, but the fact remains, if you cannot get blood to a tissue, you cannot perform beyond menial tasks, or you're going to injure that tissue. If you cannot get blood flow to your joints, your joints will be the weakest link and you'll tear something. You'll tear a tendon, you'll tear a ligament, you'll tear cartilage. You have to find ways to make sure you can get blood flow. And once you get blood flow established, then you can supplement hormones to make sure that those tissues get the directives that they need in order to stockpile nutrients and accord those nutrients to regenerative growth. And that applies to tendons, that applies to ligaments, that applies to bone, that applies to cartilage, and it applies to muscle. And unfortunately, if you don't have an appropriate level of testosterone, don't expect to be able to perform at a level that you would expect that your body should be able to perform at, because you cannot heal fast enough by the next time you go to the gym to be able to perform with improvements. You're just going to create possibilities for injury. So that is where the argument of, hey, society, if you want to take care of yourself, if you want to get out of your chair and back into the gym and have a successful outcome, you cannot ignore that if you have a deficiency of nutrients, you're going to get arthritis. You're going to perpetuate arthritis. Your back's going to be worse. You're going to tear a muscle. You're going to throw your shoulder out. And whatever area of your body it is that gets exploited through exercise will be the area that you cannot get enough oxygen to, you can't get enough nutrients to, and that is all to do with your circulatory system, which needs support, or you do not have enough hormones in your body to direct the use of the oxygen and the nutrients that you're providing to those tissues so that they can heal properly. So don't expect to go to the gym and get results. And if you do, you're lucky, and I wish I were you. But those of us who are not as lucky as you are, we need to check in and talk to a doctor. And rather than getting pain meds, and rather than getting cholesterol meds, we need some true interventions that will help to treat the cause of this problem. And if it's hormones, then we have to start talking about testing and seeing what we can do about replacing some of those hormones. At least try it out. You don't have to. You're not stuck on hormones for the rest of your life if you don't feel like they're worth doing. But I think if you're really struggling and you're at the point where it's a decision between going and getting surgery or dealing with a problem for as long as you can, maybe there's a recourse in helping to improve all of those systems so that we can find a solution. And it's not always replacing hormones, but the option should be there if it's a necessity. And you should be able to choose to do that option if you think it's appropriate for you.
So you think that hormonal depletion has really not changed over the last couple of generations,
I don't think so.
Lifestyle has made it that you don't?
I think lifestyle. I think for the average person, you could argue, what about parabens and persistent organic pollutants that are estrogen mimetics?
Right.
Yeah, there could be something there, but until I see good data, I can't start arguing on some myth. On behalf of some myth. But what I can do is I could just be practical and look at how lifestyle has changed and continues to change. And you're seeing it yourself. People attached to their phones now. The lifestyle is changing for the betterment of humanity on some levels, but maybe to the detriment of certain individuals. And I would love for us to still be able to plug into doing exercise. And I just think that if you look at the average person, they're living a really competitive life. And the amount of things that are higher on their priority list make exercising the lower of the priorities. And the only suggestion I can say is, if you're young and you're still planning your life, plan with these factors in mind, and maybe it will help to guide some choices. Maybe, for example, having kids now is not the best thing to do. It's a hard thing to do though, because you get in a relationship and you fall in love, and next thing you're talking about is, well, I want to make this whole thing a package deal, and let's have some kids and start a family. But when you're 25 years old, if anybody who's listening to this is over 40, 50 years old, I think a lot of us are looking back saying, well, geez, man, if you could only put that off for 10 years, really go to school, live in the world for a little while longer, and find your craft and your place and your, pursue your dreams, because you don't want to be blaming yourself, and you don't want to be blaming your family if you can't pursue those things. And putting off kids for a little longer may help you to continue to develop good habits in terms of staying active and staying healthy, and developing your career and your passions, and exploring those things. And I really wouldn't want to have to take that away from people because they feel like they should start a family at a really young age. But there are some people whose passion is family, and for those people, then go for it. That's what you need. That's what you're going to do. But when you do things too early and you get saddled with responsibilities, then you will take care of yourself less. And I just see more people doing it that way, and it's unfortunate because they're unhappy and they don't want to admit it, and they wish they could have gone back and made different choices. But when they have kids, they don't want to say, well, maybe I shouldn't have had kids, because then you're confessing something that will change the way you look at your family. And people just don't want to even go and talk about that. They will just find a way to make it work, and that's good for them, because they love their family and they love their kids, and that's where they're at. But it does take away from them taking care of themselves, and so when they finally get out of it and they have a little more free time, that's when you see people coming in and poking their head in the door and saying, hey, what do you do here? My kids just went off to college and I have all this free time, and I need to replace my empty nester feeling with maybe something new, and I want to take care of myself. So what do I need to do? And I'm like, hey, come on in, let's talk about it.
The book you said that you spent the 2 years, was that the Wellness Companion?
Yeah, and it's sitting in my garage because I have to. There's a website portion that I have to finish, and I've had some bad luck with that. So yeah, it's for people. It actually was built for prospective patients that are like unsure of, like like they've gone through it a couple times and had bad luck. They want to make sure that they're making the right choice. So it was to help them to sort of say, well, here's where you're at, and here's some stuff to ask the doctor. And if that ends up being me, then great. If it ends up being somebody else, at least you'll have some tools you can go to your doctor with to ask some questions and make sure that that person has the tools to offer that you're looking for. Because sometimes, different sets of tools may not work for you, and may work for somebody else. So it's good to be able to ask.
Is that available that people can go on Amazon or online and get it?
It's only available through my practice because until the website is complete, the book makes reference to that. And I wouldn't want to sell somebody arbitrarily a book that sends them to a website that they can't really participate in. I mean, they can view it, but it doesn't have my picture on it, and it doesn't have opportunities to find the help that it's intended to help them find. So until I get that project done, the book is here, and it's me. You're coming to me. It's really more for me to sell my services, and that's not really what it was intended for. So if I have a patient that's established and maybe they want to buy it and share it with their family and say, hey, I'm seeing this guy, and if you're curious, Mom, you've got your arthritis issue. Why don't you read his book? Instead of going to the website, just call him if you want to set something up, and that way they can get informed, and that way the book is being used appropriately. But I won't put it on the market until the loop has been closed. So I'm welcome to, you can have it, and you can use that as a tool if you feel that it's appropriate to offer as an explanation for what I do. But beyond that, it'll have to wait.
Well, when you get it, let us know. We'll help push it out as much as we can.
It's a project I've been putting off because I've been busy with other things. But I will certainly let you know.
So you mentioned the website. Where can people go to learn more about you or follow you? Website.
Well, you can go to the website in its incomplete form. It does not have me on it.
Okay.
And I did that because I didn't want it to be about me. I wanted it to be about a learning process. But it's called www.wellnessconsultants.org. And you can actually click through it, and it's got the book, but it's also got a little feature that you can kind of run through an illustrated narrative. It's a little animated narrative you can go through, and it kind of talks about the food gut brain connection, which at the time I was doing a lot of work on and found really interesting. And you can learn. Like, you can go on there and it'll take you 20 minutes, and you're like, oh, that's cool. It's a cool little animated narrative that you can click your way through and answer a few questions along the way. And in the end, it gives you like a little readout of how good you're doing or how not good you're doing. And the intention there was then to allow people to go and do a more thorough questionnaire and get more data, and then that to help them plug into a practitioner that does kind of the process that I do, which is the 6 section narrative that I do through my practice that you've kind of dipped your toe in.
Right. Yeah. So anyone listening, if you wanted to work with Dr. Hollis, after you check out his website, reach out to him. You can do it because you're in California. I'm on the East Coast. Yeah. We do it via phone, and the testings and so on. He'll take you through that. If someone wanted to get a hold of you, the website's the best way to do it?
Actually, if somebody wants to get a hold of me, the best way to do it right now is through you.
Okay.
The website does not have information about me on it, and I'd rather I prefer that any patients that I deal with go through a discussion or narrative with a referral.
Sure.
And because you're doing this, and it also helps to keep us all connected, which I think is a good thing. And they'll come to you and ask you about it, and we can take care of them.
Yeah, and on all wherever the podcast is, people can, my contact information is all over. They can get to me very easily. So basically, I mean, eat the best food you can, get out and be as active as you can, giving your lifestyle, and enjoy the life the best you can. And if you can't do any of those, then reach out to us and we'll get them in touch with you.
Get them set up. Yeah, hey, it sounds good. Good advice.
Been awesome. A lot of information. I'm sure people are going to get a lot out of this. And it's been great.
Yeah, I love talking to you. It was a lot of fun. You're really good at bringing that out. So for a little hermit like me, it's a real gift when I can chat and share with people what I do.
Well,
so
the whole
I really
thing,
appreciate that. Thank you.
Golf 360 is supposed to be anything involved that will help people benefit their game and or their life. And I think if people listen to this, then they're really going to get the benefit out of it.
Absolutely. I hope so.
Awesome. Doc, thanks for your time, and I'll be talking to you soon.
Welcome. All right. Take care.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you enjoyed it, you can find more information on today's episode and other topics at golf360.blog. There you'll find the show notes and links related to this episode, as well as any other episode that we've done so far to date. If you're interested in improving your game and would like to learn more from yours truly by taking a private lesson, a half-day or multi-day school, club or putter fitting, you can reach me through the blog site or by email, pete@golf360.blog. So some of you may be asking, what is the golf paradigm? All you have to do is click on the homepage while on my blog site to discover how you can start playing better than you ever thought possible. Or you can simply sign up again on the blog page for my instructional videos where I give regular tips on all areas of the game to include the swing, club design and fitting, health, fitness and nutrition, the mental aspects, and equally as important, the integration of all those things together. I'm also on social media, and you can find me at The Golf Paradigm. That's PARADIGM. And I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, also under the same name, The Golf Paradigm. Facebook is usually the best way to reach me for questions and or comments, and I look forward to hearing what all of you have to say.